Hello and welcome to a special episode of In PS We Trust. Now I'm Davey, and joined with me as always is Phil.
What's happening, baby?
And Spencer.
What's up, guys?
So this episode is going to be a Spider-Man Miles Morales Spoilercast. So I gotta say from the top, if you haven't played the game yet, or if you're halfway through and just looking to get to the end, don't listen to this podcast. Come back after you've finished it, because we are going to be spoiling the absolute living shit out of it. So the best place to start any spoilercast is to talk about the plot. So Phil, what were your thoughts after finishing the game? Were you happy with it?
I've only just finished the game. I was probably the last one to finish the game out of the three of us. I'd only finished it a couple of days ago. And to be honest, it took me on a journey which I wasn't really expecting. I don't have the sort of background knowledge of Miles Morales. I know nothing about the character. I don't know anything about the bad guys that he runs into, nothing about like his family, his relationship with Peter. It was all kind of new to me. The only things I had really known about him was from the previous game.
I'm much in the same boat as yourself, really. The only knowledge I've got of Miles is from the Spider-Man PS4. Mm-hmm. And from Enter the Spider-Verse.
Oh, of course, yeah. I saw that movie as well. I think Spencer mentioned on the last podcast before, that he was a bit more of a fan of Miles. So you actually knew a bit more of what was going on in this sort of universe, didn't you, Spence?
Yeah, obviously I've played the game. I beat the game, watched the Spider-Verse film. I've also read the comics. I've been reading them since they started coming out. I don't think I've read all of them, and I kind of dropped off near the end or middle. But I've followed the character for a long time, and I love Miles. Dare I say, I might prefer him to Peter Parker.
Wow.
That's crazy talk, but I'm sure we're going to get to that later on in the podcast.
Yeah, I think the game really just, took me on a journey which, as I said, I wasn't really expecting. Everything that was coming up, every twist and turn was new to me. When I played the first game through, obviously a lot of that is kind of the 90s cartoon, things I've read in comic books, things I've seen in the movies, sort of repeated, regurgitated in a new format. But definitely with Miles, it was all brand new, and I loved it for being that.
For myself, when I first wrapped the game, I thought it was really self-contained. I thought it was really good. What I really liked about it was that it was a personal story to Miles. And that's what I think they've done really well with this and the previous Spider-Man game, is that they've made the stories personal to the antagonist and to the protagonist. So you've got both of them where there's this interconnecting story between both their personal and their superhero lives kind of clashing. And there's that link between it. I think that just works really well to telling an emotional and really heart-wrenching story.
You do feel like you've been on a journey, both the original Spider-Man and the Miles Morales version. Where you get introduced to the character is a very different place to where you end up with the character at the end of the game. You do feel like you've made a difference, controlling them through the time you're with them.
Miles in this game, obviously it begins, and he's not sure if he can even be Spider-Man because he doesn't think he'll ever be Peter. So he's always calling himself the other Spider-Man, isn't he? And then towards the end, he's realizing, even if Peter's there, I am still Spider-Man. So it's nice to watch him like transition into a more confident version of the character.
What I find really interesting is that with these Spider-Man games, they've taken a different tack to, say, the Arkham games. Playing as Bruce Wayne and Batman, but you're playing as Batman who is just Batman. He's got a plan. He's always one step ahead, and you're playing that and you're living that kind of fantasy. But there's no real character development through those games. You got no personal interaction really to any of the villains outside of the last game. And so there's always this kind of split. Whereas with the Spider-Man games, it all seems really close to home. And especially as the sections, and this works for Miles and for Peter in the two different games, we were like walking around an environment speaking to somebody. So like with Miles, when you go to the underground and you go into the underground with the Tinkerer, and you're kind of going through and seeing everything, and you're thinking, oh, Christ, this is going to kick off. We're going to suit up soon and take these guys out. And you're like kind of going through it all and thinking, where's this going to go? How's this going to end up? It's just a really good storytelling angle that they've taken with these in making it that personalized story rather than just being a Spider-Man taking on whoever the fuck, someone who doesn't matter to him, like Shocker. Spider-Man's taking on Shocker this time. It's just going to be him stopping Shocker. It doesn't mean anything else.
As you learn more about Miles and he gains more powers, it's almost like he's growing up as Spider-Man and becoming a better Spider-Man as you have more options to the combat, for example. I think this is something we're going to get onto later, and you might have mentioned the venom powers that he gets slightly into the story. As he learns those, you feel like you're knowing more about Miles, and he's growing with you as the story progresses.
Yeah, the venom powers are a really cool aspect to it. The way they implement it in the game, like obviously they're the same as he's always had in the movie and the comics, the venom shock and the camouflage. But the fact that they were able to implement it into his movement as well, it's just so cool how they've worked the character. And one thing I really like is how different the story is in this game compared to the comics in the movie. Because in the movie, you only see his mother once at the start.
But the relationship with his mother is really nice in this. I gotta say, before we get any further, he's got to be the worst person at keeping a secret identity.
Yeah, he is.
You walk into his room and he's got the spider suit out.
Well, it does at the end. Yeah. At the end, he does. Yeah.
When I came in at the end of the game, and I'm just like, well, why would he just leave that out? Come on.
I mean, imagine he brought that deaf girl home. I mean, she's not blind. She'll see that.
Wow.
I was just like, Miles, everybody knows.
To be fair, you probably can't offend the deaf community on a podcast. So, Davey, say what you like.
You got a point. We haven't put this out in Braille format. Oh no, that's blind. That's blind. It shows how ignorant I am. Oh Christ, he's just terrible. He's just literally so bad at keeping it. It's like right at the start, his mate knows from school, and it's like okay, and then you realise he's only been at that school for about 3 months. So he basically came home and told his mate immediately.
Who, Ganke?
He must have literally just told Genki frame 1. It's like, bro, never guess what? I just jumped up at the ceiling. It's like, Miles, come on, man. And then by the end of the game, literally his worst enemy, Finn, guess his worst enemy at the time, she knows, his mother knows, Genki knows, and half of Harlem and his uncle. So it's like everybody he knows he's Spider-Man.
But to be fair, they did stick up for him at the end, didn't they? And they were like, who's that guy? That guy's Spider-Man. No, he's our Spider-Man. That was so cool. They didn't just rat him out, did they?
I wish that there was a guy. There's that guy right at the end of the Amazing Spider-Man movie, and they move all the cranes over for him to swing through. And he's like, "He's Spider-Man. Go use my crane." I wish there was something like that in there. But I suppose he does at the end. He's like dancing in the street with people, right? Like at the end when you're going off, and he's like having a little jig with all the people that are inside missions. See, they all know you're Spider-Man. They know you're literally. Why go onto the top of your roof to change at this point? You might as well just do it in the street.
Yeah,
like everyone knows.
Why does he keep going up to check the electrics?
Yeah. Oh,
the electrics is out again, guys. I'm going up to the roof. Any reason? Nah.
Also, I don't know if you noticed, but adjacent to that roof is another roof of people partying all the time. So he's always getting changed, and there's literally people having a party next to him that can just see him.
He probably went round and knocked on their door on the same day he told Genki, "Oh, never guess what, guys. I got powers."
You would have thought, seeing as he has the power of invisibility, be invisible when he's changing. I don't know how that works. Is he invisible when he's naked, and then he puts on the suit, and then the suit becomes invisible?
Yeah, that is how that works.
Is that how it works? Okay, well maybe he needs to strip off, jump out his window, bang on the suit, and then off he pops.
Yeah, just do that. Easy. You can just change wherever he wants. In fact, he could be a menace. Maybe JJJ's right. Maybe J. Jonah Jameson is onto something. Maybe he is a menace.
To be fair, if any of us had that power, we wouldn't be out saving New York City, would we?
I'll tell you what I wouldn't be doing. I wouldn't be doing a podcast. I'd be straight out there right now, swinging around, turned invisible, and just getting up to some kind of mischief. Not saying what. Not saying it's a pervert way. It could just be totally innocent.
Okay, are you good or bad if you get these powers? If you get bitten by that radioactive spider, are you good or are you bad?
I'd like to think I'm good, but I've also got a feeling that I'd want to flex. I'd want to show off.
Yeah.
And
I'm knowing you 100%, you'd want to flex. Couple of drinks in you. Hey, girls.
Can you imagine literally just go up and just be like, yeah, I want to sign up for boxing. And they're like, oh, okay. And I'd be like, can I get a title fight? They're like, you're totally unknown. I'd be like, put whatever on the line, is fine. And literally just spider sense every single hit, kill him in one. Just kill him. Just fucking kill him. Knock his jaw off. Boom. And I'd be like, oh, looks like I'm busted. And then you just win everything. You just literally, every single Olympic event, enter it, win it. There's literally nothing you couldn't win. You just literally clean slate the Olympics.
Well, I mean, Spider-Man, he did have that, famous match with Macho Man Randy Savage in one of the movies.
He did, yeah.
Bonesaw is ready.
You're probably, following that narrative, aren't you? That storyline.
I would. The only thing that would probably put me onto the straight and narrow is the same thing that happens to Pete. That I'd need like an uncle to get shot or something. And I'd be like, oh, I let him go. I let the robber go. This is my superhero origin. I've done my title fight, got my belt, and the guy's like, I'm not paying you. You ended that in one round, so everyone's got their pay-per-view refunded. And I'm like, well, that's not my problem. Like, I won the fight. The guy's like, no, you ain't getting your money. You're not getting your money. Then he gets robbed. I let the robber go, because I'm like, yeah, it's fine. And then my uncle gets shot. So basically, Peter Parker's origin. I just need that to happen to me, and then I'd be good. But without that, oh yeah, I'd be bad.
Well, on the podcast, I'm probably the more mature figure. I'm probably the father figure of the group. So probably I'd be the one getting shot out of the three of us. If you got bitten by the radioactive spider, I'd be shot.
I'd take that trade, mate.
Not
I'm
good.
sorry to say. I would take that trade.
See, I preferred us going down the Nathan Drake storyline rather than the Spider-Man one, because then I could spend all my time in Hawaiian shirts smoking big fat cigars.
Yeah, you'd at least live in that storyline. So there's something there.
So, boys, after discussion, we've all clearly very much enjoyed the plot and thought it was quite meaningful for Miles and very personal. How do both of you think it compared to the original game with Peter Parker?
Well, I think the big difference is you're talking much bigger scale on Peter's story. So whereas in this, if Miles had failed, the destruction would have been for his area of New York.
Yeah.
Whereas on Peter's, it's the entirety of New York and then ongoing. And then you're talking worldwide scale because it's a big infection. The stakes then also come down to, the stakes in Peter's are a lot higher in my opinion, because he has to sacrifice his aunt or the city, one or the other. Whereas in this, Miles didn't have a choice. He was whisked up and Finn sacrificed herself, which I don't think she even needed to do.
She didn't.
If I'm honest with you.
No.
Like, she could have literally just chucked Miles up, come down, and he could have exploded in the air, done. Absolutely fine. But she was like, no, I'll just kill myself as well because I can't live with it, I guess. So, on Miles' story, it's that much smaller, which makes sense to the fact that he is starting off. Whereas on Peter's, it is a much larger scale. He's facing a lot more than Miles is. He's fighting 3 bosses max, right? If you're talking Roxxon, Rhino, and then the Tinkerer and her army. And then I suppose his personal rift with his uncle, but that's not really a proper fight. That's just, neither of them are wanting to really hurt each other. They're just trying to keep each other safe, really, ultimately.
Just to nip in, which was the hardest boss for you guys?
For me, easily the Tinkerer, because I played through the whole
boss.
game and I didn't die at all. And then for the Tinkerer, I died 4 times, I think. But all of those deaths were prior to the actual big fight, and they were just in the street clearing people out. Because it was 2 big brutes, and they would just always smack me one, because I had no venom.
For me, it was the second fight with Rhino was the hardest.
I thought that as well. I thought the Rhino fight was the hardest. I think by the time you got to the Tinkerer, like, all his powers were like really powerful, right? And those remote bombs, they just bust the fight.
Yeah.
Like, you just shoot one at the boss, and then she kind of can't do what she needs to do.
Yeah.
And then you just win. So yeah, I didn't find the end fight really that difficult. I think the Rhino fight was at the point where maybe I hadn't powered up enough, and I found him really difficult.
Yeah, with the Rhino fight, I went into it with no venom, and so I had to grind my venom up to then get him into a stun lock situation where you just venom, hit him, and it's just continual. He's just getting wrecked then.
Yeah, we pretty much had the same experience then, because obviously to gain venom, you've got a perfect dodge at certain times, haven't you? And that sort of mounts up the energy that you have to be able to do the venom punches. So yeah, it was very much, I've got to run away, avoid all the guys that are shooting me, and on one of the hardest difficulties, because there is a difficulty higher than that once you complete the game. The shots are very fast, aren't they? And you've got to dodge, and then you've got to dodge Rhino stamping on the floor, which, if that hits you, that does a hell of a lot of damage. So yeah, I definitely found the Rhino fight very difficult.
Yeah, Tinkerer wasn't too bad. I did, I think, second time, so I think it was okay. And the first time was because I just got caught by a couple of her gimmicks, and it was a thing of, when you're doing too much damage and then she hits you off with a shield.
Yeah.
Well, that would kill me. That killed me twice.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay.
You just had to remember that you could do like 3 or 4 punches, and then she would block you. So you basically had to just let her have the block, if you like, rather than get blocked and dodge the block. And that's how I did it anyway, and I just did it with the remote mines.
Yeah, I was the same. But yeah, I mean, that's my thought on it, going back to it. It's just that the story for Peter is obviously a much larger scale, and for me is more effective than the Miles story because it has a lot more personal consequence. You know, we've had 70 odd years worth of Peter Parker and Aunt May through comics, you know, different forms of media, through the animated series. We know this relationship between the two of them, so making that sacrifice is so powerful. Whereas with Finn, we've known her for 10 hours.
Do you think because you've grown up with Peter, you know, and you have that affinity with that character, you know, you've watched the 90s cartoon many a time like me, and you've read the comic books and you've seen a lot of the movies which, you know, have Peter in as opposed to Miles, do you feel like that storyline probably meant more to you than Miles, which is a brand new character to you? The
difference with it is mostly just that you get less time with the Miles story. So you get maybe 12, 15 hours to 100% the entire game. And that doesn't leave as long to build up the side characters as it does in Peter's story.
Much like me, Davey, we're both fans of the 90s Spider-Man cartoon. I don't remember the bad guy sort of featuring in that at all. So I had no kind of affinity to what was going on with the main bad guy in the original one. That was all new to me.
Yeah, Mr. Negative.
Mr. Negative, that's his name. Yeah, see, I couldn't even remember his name. I'll put on the spot. But yeah, I didn't really have that you know, that background that I would have with like Scorpion or Kingpin or, you know, Doc Ock, you know. Do
you think then, this is probably quite a poignant question, do you think then, in terms of, you had no prior knowledge to the Tinkerer, you said on the last podcast, you didn't know who that was, and you also, what you just told me now, you didn't know who Martin Lee was, Mr. Negative. What are your opinions on the two villains then? Who do you think was more effective?
If you're comparing the two, obviously with the Tinkerer, you get to know a bit more of the human side, you know, and she features a lot more in the story. Obviously with the original Spider-Man, it's a much longer game, isn't it? So you get to kind of understand the motives a bit more, I suppose. I think, yeah, maybe with the Tinkerer, that if Miles was a longer game, and we'll probably speak about this a bit later in one of the later topics, you know, we would have got a bit more background on sort of like her motives.
Yeah.
I think her motives are strong enough. I think the problem is that you just don't get the same depth of relationship that you do with Peter and Martin Lee, in that he's the guy who's running Feast where your aunt works at. He's the guy who, you know, you go into his office, you have a little sit down with him, you're having a chat, you're speaking to him loads before you find out he's Mr. Negative. So you get this bit of a relationship built up. And so as Peter's discovering that Mr. Negative is Martin Lee, there's that kind of turmoil then that he knows his aunt is there, that he's got to go into that building with his aunt there, so he's putting her in danger. You get these extra stakes. Whereas with Finn, you meet her and you have like one cutscene with her, and then you find out it's her.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, okay.
To be fair, you knew it was her as soon as you saw the Tinkerer, though, yeah?
Yeah. I was actually really happy that they literally said that she's the Tinkerer right away, because immediately it's so blatantly obvious. And if that was like the twist towards the end, I wouldn't have been very happy. I'm actually quite glad that they said it right away.
I remember like Facebook messaging you about this. It would have been awful if they had kept it like a secret, a big reveal at the end that, oh my God, she was the Tinkerer. Because the moment she steps off the back of that lorry, I think it is on the bridge, is that the first time you see her? And you have that big kind of like iconic fight that you've seen, you know, on the on all the launch videos where he's pulling the bridge together, and you see the Tinkerer. You just know by the way she walks that it's definitely her, because that's the only female character that you've even met up to that point, outside of your mum, I suppose. That would be a terrible twist if it was your mum.
I tell you what, I do like what they've done with the Tinkerer in this. I mean, I know you guys aren't too familiar with the character, but the character's been a long-term Spider-Man villain for ages. The Tinkerer was shown in movies, actually. You know in Spider-Man Homecoming?
Sure.
Yeah.
You know the guy who's making all the Vulture's tech?
Yeah.
That's the Tinkerer. It's always been a bloke. So they gender bent it, and I thought it worked really well. I thought it was a really good way to make this kind of not a triple threat level villain for Spider-Man. You know, he's not like one of the Sinister Six or anything like that. He's more of a kind of sub-character. To give him a kind of that shining light, I thought was a good way, and especially to flip it and make it Finn, you know, his best friend, who's also kind of hinted at potentially a love interest with how they're flirting with each other in that kitchen scene with the splashing water on each other. I was like, oh, it's getting a bit It's getting a bit flirty. I was like, let's go, Miles. And then I'm glad he didn't, because, you know.
It's getting a bit Last of Us. Let's hope no one walks in at that vital moment.
That kissing scene really affected you, didn't it? Did Laura walk in when they were kissing? She was like, oh, just closes the door behind her.
It always seems to happen, you know, when I was living at home and now living here in Bristol, whenever a video game goes to those places, someone just has to walk in. And
Yeah.
I'm 35. I still turn around with the most guilty look on my face, as if I'm just watching porn. And then I've just been caught. Oh my God.
It's the time before, you know, on God of War 3.
Go into the bedroom, can't you? Yeah.
Yeah, you can go and lay Aphrodite, I think it is, and you just press circle to bang her. Is that what happened to you? Did your mum walk in as soon as it was press circle to bang, and your mum was like, oh, sorry, Phil?
I very much blanked that from my memory, Davey, but thanks for bringing that up.
It's all rushing back. This is where it is. This is almost like a therapy session.
Should we try bring it back? I quite liked, obviously, after hearing you both speak about Martin Lee and Miss Negative, I do recall it. And having to like walk around feast with him, I thought he was a good villain. I think I preferred the Tinkerer. I like how at the beginning of the game in Miles, the first time you ever meet Finn, and before you even know she's a Tinkerer, she fixes the doorbell, which has been broken for years. So yeah, they kind of foreshadowed that, and that was nice. I'm not too familiar with the character other than in this story.
So as you are a Miles fan and you know a bit of his background, was there any kind of bad guys that you maybe wished had turned up in this video game?
No, I think they did enough. Obviously, as Uncle Aaron had to be in there. And I'm quite glad they put a fight in it, because I actually didn't think they would. I like what they did with the story in this, because usually it's the uncle that dies. Uncle Aaron dies, the Prowler dies. Same as Peter Parker, Uncle Ben.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously they wanted to do something different, so they made it his father that died. So I quite like how it's gone. I want to see where it goes in the future with his uncle. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention earlier on, but it kind of just died into the conversation. I like how they handled his parents, because usually his mother is a nurse.
Mm-hmm.
And I like how, because the father figure wasn't there to be his inspiration, they made it his mother and made her a politician. I thought that was really cool. I'm a bit sad about his dad dying, but obviously that happened in the first game.
Sure.
And it's a bit weird that they did that prior to him becoming Spider-Man, because usually that's the motivation they need, especially with Peter. And I'd have figured they'd do the same with Miles, but they just didn't.
Yeah, death in Spider-Man definitely seems like a trigger to go out and then
do good
and kind of solve those wrongs that maybe, you know, the person that passed away was kind of fighting. You know, with Miles, obviously his dad was trying to save the city in his own way, but he didn't have superpowers. You know, as a cop, he's out there, you know, on the front line trying to save the world as such. So Miles is, you know, living his life as Spider-Man for his dad.
Yeah.
So you know my thoughts on it in terms of which I prefer and which I think was more effective, and the reason why I feel that Peter's story is a more effective one, mainly due to runtime. But Phil, which one do you ultimately prefer, and which one do you think is the superior product out of the two? Just plots, not gameplay wise.
I was going to say, if we're just purely talking, you know, the storyline, I've got so many links to like Peter's story, and I've heard it a million times, right? You know, yeah. I know all the things that are going to happen, and you know, it's kind of obvious. I think I enjoyed Miles a lot more because it was new, a new take on everything. Yeah, so out of the two, I probably would say I enjoyed Miles more than the original Spider-Man when it comes to plot.
What about yourself, Spence?
My experience, well, not going to lie, I don't remember a lot of PS4 Spider-Man. And I love Peter Parker. Obviously, I grew up with Peter Parker. I remember being a kid, going and watching the first films, the trilogy. Watched the Amazing Spider-Man films, less good. Watched the cartoon all my life. I've got a Spider-Man tattoo on my arm. I love Peter Parker. I love Spider-Man. But the plot, comparatively, obviously, the runtime does help Spider-Man PS4 a lot more. It helps you get to know the characters, even though, like, Peter and Aunt May, which is obviously how that ends. Everyone knows Aunt May. Everyone does. And everyone cares about that character just because of how affectionate she is for her nephew and how she looks after him. Everyone cares about Aunt May. So that ending was a bit more damning, I'd say, than Finn dying in Miles.
What do you feel about the cast? And is there anyone that really stands out to you that you really enjoyed their performance or their role that they played in the story?
For me, I loved his mother was good. Ganke, I thought was brilliant. Everything he did was funny. All the little calls in between were great. Miles was good. I'm not a big fan of his voice.
I'd love to be friends with Genki, just so I could get him to edit this podcast, because
Yeah.
he'd have it done in 2 seconds. Miles' mum's like, can you get this trending by midnight? He's like, I'll get it trending in 10 minutes, love. She gets it done. Whereas I could chuck him a 6-hour podcast and it'd be done in 20 minutes.
I do love the way whenever he's programming, he just throws up a bit of Java and he's like, yeah, it's done. It's brilliant. I love it. Yeah, I wish I could program that well.
Yeah, you just got to get on his level.
Exactly.
Genki's just another level.
Like overnight, he created an entire app just for Peter. Not for Peter, for Miles. Just to help him solve crimes. For people to actually contact him, he just did that in the night whilst Miles was asleep.
I think one of the stories later on is he's creating a game, isn't he? And then he wants
Speed
Miles
Nonagon.
to do the soundtrack for him, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Because he's got the mixing desks and things in his apartment, which is very cool.
That's what's holding up his game development. Because Miles is out fighting too many crimes.
Exactly.
He needs to sit down and get on the decks.
Spin the ones and twos. Come on.
Yeah, he does. Hurry up, Miles. Jesus Christ. Do that while you're invisible. Take it with you.
I mean, not only that, but Ganke also kind of has a little love interest throughout the thing. So obviously, towards the end, when you're raiding the Roxxon and the labs and stuff, he's the one that gets Miles in contact with Danica, the woman doing the podcast. In the comics, at least, they become a love interest.
Okay.
They start dating. So I'd imagine that would come into the games in the future as well.
Who does, Miles? Or
No,
Genki?
Ganke. Ganke and Danica, the girl doing the podcast.
Ooh. Oh, I didn't know that.
As far as I know, the Miles's main love interest is Gwen. In the comics, in the movie as well. Obviously, if you've seen, maybe in the future of the game. I don't know what they're going to do with Spider-Gwen.
What about in the 616? Gwen's not in the 616. Obviously, she died. Unless she's back in it now after they kind of melded all the universes together. Is that a thing now?
It's not Gwen Stacy, it's Spider-Gwen. So like even in the 616 universe, there's a part in Miles' story where they start messing with the Spider-Verse and him and Spider-Gwen meet. There's literally one of the covers of the comics is Miles making out with Spider-Gwen.
Fair.
Interesting to know. So Genki's obviously is the boy. He's
Yeah.
a great little character. The guy that I loved the performance for was the Prowler. I loved Uncle Aaron. I thought he was great. I thought he was really good. And I thought that the way that his worldview was so different to what Peter's is. And obviously
Yeah.
Peter's been training him this entire time and making him so that he's thinking about everyone else other than himself. And his uncle's out for number one. And out for protecting what's his and out for looking after himself. It's just this totally different ideology that Miles hasn't come into contact with. And he's got to kind of make this choice. And he's going back and forth in his own moral compass throughout the game with following his uncle's advice of not to tell Finn and then following his own kind of moral code, which is kind of instructed by Peter. And it's that kind of, that friction between the two that I found really fascinating.
Well, as I asked you at the start of the podcast, if you had the powers, would you be good or bad? His uncle, he walks the line, doesn't he? He's done some bad things, he's done some good things. And you find that as it progresses in the story. I definitely say the good things was definitely helping you out, but then he definitely gets you into trouble in the game as well.
In this game, he walks the line very much.
Yeah.
In like the comics and the movie, obviously he's just a villain and then he dies. He doesn't really get a chance to walk the line. I guess he becomes good when he chooses not to like kill Miles, I suppose, when he finds out he's Spider-Man or still hunts Spider-Man. And that's the same in the comics and the movie. He just puts the mask back on and obviously then he dies. But in this, yeah, they did obviously make him turn over and now he's looking out for other people than himself, which is what I'd imagine is part of what happened with him and Miles' father, because Miles' father very much had the viewpoint of looking out for everyone else. And that's probably a big tie into why they stopped talking.
Sure, because one of the last things that I'm experiencing in the game is those conversations you're having with your uncle while he's in prison, and you're finding out that he's kind of turning that leaf, isn't he, towards the good.
One thing about that, it's crazy that he's only in there for 2 years.
Yeah, very true.
It is a plea deal, but 2 years is quite short.
Must be a hell of a lot of evidence he had.
It probably was.
But I mean, you're Spider-Man, and I don't know the way you guys have been playing the game, but I've been kicking people off roofs left, right, and centre. I should be in jail.
If you swing past, you'll realise they're stuck to the wall.
Same thing happened in the Spider-Man PS4. Like a little web grenade is on them, I suppose, and it webs them to a wall. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but it makes more sense than them dying.
It always makes me laugh when you're beating them up and then you kick them off the top of a rooftop.
Yeah.
Oh my God, surely that would put you off wanting to be a bad guy in these games.
That actually, I thought about that before. The kind of kicking people off would they die and stuff, and I thought it'd be funny. Obviously, Miles' big mistake at the start of this game is the helicopter where he lets it crash. I would have thought it'd be funnier and make a bit of sense if obviously he's just learning to be Spider-Man. What if he didn't know to pull his punches, and he fought his first enemy and he just killed them right away?
Yeah, that would be grim, wouldn't it? That would be. Christ, we're getting into a proper serious story.
I know.
If we're dealing with him causing the death of some random thug.
That'd be awesome.
Just some random guy holding up a liquor store, he just punches his jaw off. Just be like, Jesus Christ.
That'd be gruesome.
This is dark.
Maybe when you're punching the people and you're knocking them off those rooftops, just to go back to my previous point, that you could web them and bring them back on, because I'd never noticed that if you kick them off, they fall down and they get webbed to the side. I always thought that, when I'm beating people up at the top of the Empire State Building, they're falling down like those coins. And they're going 100 miles an hour, 200 miles an hour towards Earth,
The crazy thing about it really is that Mythbusters proved that if you fired a coin off the top of the Empire State, it wouldn't kill someone.
But this is
I
a
don't
human
know about
being.
a Roxxon soldier. Yeah, Roxxon soldier in armor. That might do some damage. That might damage property at that point.
I might.
So I think that's a good thing. He's got those web grenades just to hand to put on people. But I tell you what I do find. If I was a Roxxon guard, right, and Spider-Man dropped in front of me and he's just taken out 20 of my blokes, I'd be like, I'm putting a gun down. I quit.
I'd be shooting myself.
Just immediately kill yourself.
Yeah.
I'd be like, Spider-Man, look, just go invisible, just get out of here. I'm going to lie down and pretend I'm knocked out. Don't break a couple of ribs. I don't need it. I'm paid minimum wage. And that would be it. I wouldn't be like some of these guys that are like, it's goddamn Spider-Man. And they're like trying to take him on. It's like, you fucking insane.
I like the way you've chosen. If I was one of the Roxxon guards, what if you were just one of the guys with the fucking metal pipes that comes at him? Who are they? They're complete psychopaths coming at him with a metal pipe. Some people have got guns and they're losing. He's going at him with a hand-to-hand combat metal pipe.
What I like is that guy, when you've got to go on that side mission to rescue that cat.
Sure.
And there's the cat in the backpack. And there's that big bruiser comes out and he's like, you ain't taking my cat, Spider-Man. And he fights with his fist. I'd be like, take the cat. Take my money. Take whatever you want. I've seen what you do to proper arch villains. I see what you did to Rhino. Like, what am I going to do? Just a bloke in a hoodie. Like, even if I am £300.
That's true. Yeah.
I'd be like, take the bag. Just take it. Like in Terminator 2? You in Terminator 2 where... Nope. You haven't seen Terminator 2?
Mate, we've already established I don't watch films from this podcast, haven't we?
Oh, my God. Basically, in Terminator 2, if somebody goes and puts a cigar out on your chest and they just look at it and then break your hand, just give them what they want. Don't smack them with a pool cue over the back of the neck. It's not going to end well. And that's what the biker gang learned in Terminator 2. If I was in that situation, if I put a cigar out on someone's chest and they then broke my hand, I'd be like, just do what you want, mate. Do you want my anal virginity? Because you got it. Whatever you want is not off limits. Don't kill me. Don't kill me. All right? So if I was a Roxxon guard, I would just shit my pants, lie down in a ball, and then just wait until everyone else wakes up. And then I'll wake up and be like, oh my God, I think I cracked a rib. And then just walk off. But I suppose for a game, it wouldn't really work that well, would it? If you just literally wipe some guy out and the rest of the team are like, fuck this. Just walk out.
That would be funny if there was a game created where the bad guys actually just thought like real life. They were just like, do you know what? Actually, we're just not really into this. We'll just leave you alone. Let you have this one. Wouldn't be much of a game, really. It'd be mainly you just walking through and people going, do you know what? He's a bit harder than me. I think I'll leave that.
Because in the Batman games, what I like is that you incite fear. So you take out a load of the guards, and at the end they're like cacking it. So you can land in front of the last guy, and he won't even shoot. He's like, just like cacking his pants in front of you, and he's like, it's Batman, and you could just lamp him out, right?
Really?
One hit.
I haven't played the Batman games. I'm not such a big fan of Batman as I am to sort of the Marvel universe. But that's a really cool kind of, dynamic to a game to incite fear, because that doesn't affect anyone in Spider-Man. People are coming up to me at the end of the game when I'm fully leveled up. I've got all these venom powers with a lead pipe trying to take me on. It's just quite fun to let them have a couple of hits sometimes.
Just let him get a free hit.
Yeah, go on. Have a hit, and then it's boom.
Just get venom punched off the side of the building.
Exactly.
Are there any other characters that you guys...
Well, I was just going to say, I love all the comedy aspects to these games, and Joe Jameson, as soon as he comes on the radio, just cracks me up every single time when he's going on, because it's such a twisted view, and by the end of the game, obviously, Miles is saving, his part of New York, and he's renowned for doing what he's doing, and you get all these callers come in, and they go, oh, actually... Spider-Man saved me, and then he's changing his view slightly as you progress through the game, and it just makes me laugh. I love hearing his voice.
Yeah, I thought J. Jonah Jameson was great again. I thought he was so good in the first game, and I'm so glad they got the same guy back to do the voice, and his delivery of everything's great.
It's brilliant.
I love that one scene right at the start of the game where you crash through his office, and he's trying to think of how he's going to describe Spider-Man this time, and then as soon as he walks, he's like, he's a goddamn menace, and he's like, that's it, that's the take. I love that. He's in his Christmas suit. I thought he was fantastic. The Danica podcast I didn't really enjoy. I'm not going to lie. I could have muted it. I didn't think it added anything. I didn't think it was even very good. She gave me the kind of updates in terms of what's happened in kind of a more positive light. But I didn't feel like there was anything there that I was like, oh, that was interesting to know.
As Spencer said earlier, that she's quite a big character maybe in the comics, where she ends up with Ganke. Maybe it's just because we don't know that character. We're just like, what's she to do with anything really, other than, a couple of news updates, where equally, Jameson could have been able to say those.
Yeah, true. Maybe it's just a case of foreshadowing, and maybe in the next game we'll get some more time with her, and maybe I'll change my tune.
It might have been better if they maybe introduced her as a physical character in the game. You'd met her a couple of times rather than it just purely being on the podcast. So she had a bit more basis in kind of real life, not real life, but just in the story as such.
Yeah, a bit more grounding. Yeah, a bit more grounding in terms of the tale itself. And I suppose this brings us on to the final person then that we should really talk about in any depth, and that's Simon Krieger, who's the main villain. What do you guys think about him?
I loved Simon Krieger. I thought he was well funny. Obviously, you first meet him and he's congratulating you and Peter for defeating Rhino. And he's just lovely at first. Well, kind of lovely. I don't know. He's smug. And he thinks he's the man, obviously, doesn't he? And then you learn more about him, and his ego is insane. And the way he talks, the way he presents himself is so funny and so class. I actually loved him as a villain.
I thought that one scene that he has was really threatening. When Miles is tied up and he goes up to him and he tries to take the mask off, and it shocks him. He's like, oh, is that a self-defense mechanism? He's like, oh, I can't wait to see what makes you tick. And the way he walks out and he's like, well, it's leg day. I got to go. I can't skip leg day. I was like, this guy's an absolute lad. I could go on the beers with Simon Krieger, and I reckon it'd be top night. Just a really just imposing threat that isn't a physical threat to Spider-Man.
I kind of wish there was a bit more screen time with him, actually. I don't feel like we got enough of Simon Krieger throughout the game, but he was very much the obvious bad guy. Yeah. In the story, the way he looks, the hair and the bravado and the way he talks to people, he was the obvious bad guy. But I kind of wanted him not to be the bad guy and be completely innocent. For me, it links back to, the way the Saw movie sort of handles it, where all the way through the original Saw film, you think it's one guy, but then you get the big reveal at the end. You could have done that with Simon Krieger, because he was the obvious bad guy for Spider-Man, wasn't he?
They just need that music to kick in, that dun dun dun. Dun 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 dun, and then it just turns to Ganke and it's him the entire time.
Brilliant.
Dun 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 dun.
Well, he knew he was Spider-Man, didn't he?
He did. He knows everything. Genki knows too much. He's got his back door into... He's living in his house, for God's sake. Just put a bomb under his bed. Just put a bomb under his bed, and when his spider sense going off, just be like, Miles, you're talking shit again, mate. Your powers must be on the blink. Go to bed. Boom. Done. Genki is the Genki the whole time. Da-na-na, da-na-na, da-na-na-na. But no, I agree with you, Phil. I think that Simon Krieger just... He could do with some more screen time.
I will say, as much as obviously Krieger didn't get an awful lot of screen time, you did hear him quite a lot, because obviously he featured on one of James Jonah Jameson's podcasts when you're in the final fight with the Tinkerer in the Roxxon building, he's speaking through the speakers to you both, saying about how even if you take down this building and blow up the bomb, Roxxon's going to be fine. He's like, do you know the insurance we have on this place? We'll be completely fine if you do this. In fact, I want you to blow it up. And then he says something else. He's just like, layers. And then he goes.
I think I just wanted more of what Davey mentioned earlier, was the interaction between the two of them when they were in the jail. When he was taking that mask off. I just wanted more of that, because I thought that was class.
Yeah, it's just a good way for somebody who's not physically intimidating to Spider-Man to be intimidating.
Yeah.
And I suppose the only other way they could have ratcheted it up would be if he knew that if Miles had done his typical thing and told him before he took the mask off, oh, by the way, I'm Miles Morales, just told him. And so then he'd have his mum in a cage or something and was going to kill her. Like, that's the only way they could have ratcheted it up. But I suppose Miles has told everyone else. So maybe he didn't think he had to tell him. Maybe he thought it was common knowledge. He's probably got it on his Facebook profile.
I'm Spider-Man.
Or Ganke's told him.
Dun dun dun. Dun 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 dun. It's all Ganke.
In the Spider-Man universe, there's not many characters that are a bad guy without having powers, are there? That I can think of anyway. When I'm thinking back to the 90s.
Kingpin?
But he's
super strong,
super strong, isn't he? Kingpin?
He's just big. He's just a big guy who's strong. Yeah, he's just physically strong, though. He's not like super powered.
He must be super powered to fight Spider-Man.
He's not.
He's not super powered. All
sure?
that, like, Kingpin is huge.
I'd say he's like 400 pounds, but it's all muscle.
Yeah, it is. There's no fat on his body at all. It's entirely muscle, and that's why he's so strong. It's not humanly possible, but it's also not really a superpower.
I think everyone else has kind of got powers as such, haven't they?
If it was like true to it, Spider-Man could take out Cap like it's nothing.
Yeah.
Spider-Man could take out Wolverine like it's nothing. His strength level is actually insane. And granted, this is Miles, so he's not as strong as Peter just because he's not as mature. And he certainly doesn't have the same fighting skills that Peter has.
No.
Peter's got a lot more time doing it. And he's got his own fighting style, which he pioneered with Iron Fist. He's got like all these different advantages that Miles doesn't have.
Miles does have the other powers to compensate, though, with the camouflage for like sneak attacks and the venom strikes.
True. But in terms of a normal bloke taking on Spider-Man, it wouldn't really happen. Like, if Spider-Man wanted to, he could just kill Kingpin. Like, he could just kill him in one hit. Like, in what I found really interesting, this is going off on a bit of a side note, but it might be quite interesting to you guys. So one of my favourite Spider-Man graphic novels and one of my favourite Spider-Man stories is Superior Spider-Man.
Sure.
So that's the story of when Doc Ock goes into Peter's body and he becomes Spider-Man.
Yeah, I know that.
And so he basically, Doc Ock's on his deathbed and he transfers his consciousness over into Peter's body, and then he relives all of Spider-Man's, all of Peter Parker's memories, and then realizes that he is going the same route as Spider-Man, but he wants to be a better Spider-Man than Peter is, so he becomes Superior Spider-Man. And he has a fight with Scorpion, the first thing he does, and he punches him full power, and it breaks Scorpion's jaw off, nearly kills him in one hit. And then Doc Ock realizes this entire time, every time he's fought Spider-Man, he's held back the entire time because he could just kill him in one hit if he wanted to. And I suppose that's probably also kind of the problem with Spider-Man, is that he can't really have many villains without powers because they just couldn't stack up to him. And that's why I think Simon Krieger is so good, in that he's that threat that isn't physical. And that's why I really, really like him.
I know you guys have completed the game, but have you managed to do all the side quests along the way? I know there's quite a few that sort of pop up throughout the game, because I've completed the game and I've just got another side quest after the game as such.
Yeah, I've done everything.
Yeah, I've done it all 100%.
One of the side quests I got early on was the Black Lives Matter quest line. Did you guys see that? And did you get the yellow suit?
Yeah, I got the same quest. It's not really. I'm not sure how to put it as a quest line, because it's kind of the quest itself where you get the suit and see the imagery is called Thank You Spider-Man, and it's obviously just Harlem thanking you for doing what you're doing for the area. They give you the suit in front of a wall with a giant graffiti Black Lives Matter image, I suppose. Mm-hmm. I think it's nice. I think it's fine.
Yeah, I did it too. And I gotta say, I think it's just a really good place to put it. It makes sense in the context of the game. Makes context in terms of the area that it's located in New York. I thought it was just a really nice little thing that they put in there, as just the game is obviously focused around a mixed race protagonist alongside a supporting cast which is all mixed race, and it's just a really good little message in there that I thought yeah, this is nice, this makes sense. It's not like as if they put that in, God of War or something crazy. It all kind of makes sense.
Yeah, for me, it didn't feel forced, did it? It just hit the right spot, didn't it? Really.
Yeah, it felt perfect for the game. It felt perfect for the story that they were telling.
So yeah, I suppose the one thing that could be controversial is the fact that when you complete it and you get that Pride of New York suit, I think it's called, or Pride of Harlem, something like that gold suit, that it kind of forces you to watch and to look at that mural and to focus on that for a while. What do you think about that? Do you think that's something that's fine to do in terms of video games as a whole, or not?
Again, I'm sure we'll all agree, I think it's fine if it's fitting to the story of the game, which obviously it very much was. I'm not sure how I feel about them forcing it on us. It's fine with me, but I'm sure a lot of people would be upset at that because people don't like having stuff shoved in their face.
So the suit is called Uptown Pride suit. And it's in front of the Black Lives Matter graffiti the camera does focus on for quite a long time.
Yeah, it very much focuses on it.
I think for some people, having that as a trophy might be awkward, right? Say if they don't agree with the movement for whatever reason, we've got to, fight both sides of the argument, haven't we? Or at least air both sides of the argument. Maybe including it as a trophy was a bit too much. It didn't need to be a trophy, did it? It could have just been an optional suit.
Well, it is an optional suit. It's not something you have to do as part of the main game.
No, but to platinum
the
game, that's where I'm going. It's not part of the main storyline.
Oh, I see.
Because it's a side quest. But to platinum the game, you would need to go through this process, go through that part of the story, and experience that part of the game.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I can see people having problems with it, and the thing I'm really surprised about is that I haven't seen anything on Twitter.
No,
because normally that's the first place you go to see some kind of kick up a fuss over nothing, and this to me is nothing because it makes perfect sense to the overall plot and to the overall themes of the game, and in terms of the supporting cast and everything. It all makes perfect sense. Whereas I think if this had been included in something random, like say for example you're playing Uncharted and then you have to collect all the trophies, and then the last mural you collect, he pulls out a little leaflet, it's a BLM leaflet, you'd be like, what the hell? This this is totally irrelevant. Like, this is random. This is just forcing it in. Whereas in Miles' story, it feels like a relevant part. And we spoke privately about this, and I said I'd expect there to be a BLM mural in this game. And I was glad there was, because to me, it just makes sense in the context of the game and where it's set. Whereas if it was in a different setting, or if it was a different kind of story that they're telling, then no, I don't think it would belong, because it needs to fit into the wider narrative and kind of support that.
Do you think if Marvel now release a Black Panther movie, do you think this message needs to then does it need to be in the game?
Mm-mm.
Well, I suppose it all depends on what they're going to do with it, and all depends on the story they're going to tell. I mean, the Black Panther movie was critically lauded, and people loved it because of it being such a black-centric story, right? And it being a focus on a black superhero. He's not the first. People say he's the first. He's not the first. Blade was there. He's not the first, but the movie was lauded because obviously it's a mostly black cast, which makes sense. It's in Africa. It should be a black majority-led cast. Having a BLM message in there, it depends. It all just depends on the context and what the game is trying to tell. Obviously, this is based in New York in the current year. It makes perfect sense for it to be there. Whereas if this was sent in 1990, then no, it has no place there because that wasn't even a remote movement. So it all depends on context for me, and context-wise, it was perfect. And I would have been more surprised if it wasn't there, because you can bet your ass there is murals like that on the side of buildings in New York, especially in Harlem, Brooklyn, any of these other areas. There's going to be those there. So it would have been surprising to me if it wasn't. So I was glad of its inclusion.
I literally could not add to your point. I agree entirely. So, boys, obviously when you begin the game, you get a choice. And the choice that they give you is, would you like to play the game in Fidelity or Performance mode? Fidelity being a constant 4K, 30 FPS ray tracing experience. And Performance wanting to stick to 60 FPS constant, no ray tracing and a dynamic resolution, so it will drop from 4K time to time. Which mode did you always play in?
When I first got my console, because I was so keen, I think probably I was too eager to get into the game to really read the setup. I just made sure I was on the hardest setting and I jumped into the game. But I think about an hour in, I thought, well, let's just have a look at, what I'd actually set the game up as. And I think, initially I did have it on performance, but I quickly switched that to fidelity. And for me, there was quite a big difference in kind of what I was seeing. I'm playing on, I think, a 65-inch Sony 4K TV in my living room with surround sound kind of Sonos speakers. And there's just a massive difference when you put it up to fidelity mode.
I was exactly the same. So with the PlayStation, as we discussed in the last episode, I messed around with the menus for ages before I even booted up Astros, which was the first game I played. So when I got to Miles, I straight away clicked fidelity. Because for me, you got a brand new console, wouldn't you want to see what it can do? And so I put on fidelity and never looked back. Played the entire game in fidelity, and the entire time, I'd run up a building and just think, oh my God. I'd run into the sunset and just think, oh my God. And then when I dropped down to the floor, I'd just walk and have traffic coming past me and think, oh my God. It was sensational. 30 frames was how the original game was played. So it doesn't feel bad. It's not like as if it's taking a downgrade from how the PS4 original was. So I didn't notice any difference. So to me, it felt like exactly the same. But how did you play it, Sven?
I played it in performance mode. Obviously, I like 60 FPS. I'm a PC gamer. I like having that constant 60. It feels smoother to me. I think the key difference for me is that fidelity didn't mean as much to me. Because obviously you boys have both said you played on a big 4K TV. I played it on my PC monitor, so a 1080p display. So even if I was in fidelity mode, I wouldn't have noticed much besides the ray tracing.
The ray tracing is pretty major. It's a pretty major improvement. But I understand what you mean. If I was in your situation, I probably would have gone for performance as well, because that's just a constant thing that you can take advantage of. Whereas the ray tracing is great and it is fantastic, and it is the difference between a next gen game and not, in my opinion. But if I was in your situation, I probably would have gone performance as well.
Yeah.
But do you feel like you've missed out on the experience to a certain extent for playing it through performance mode?
Not really, because the thing is, having now experienced a game in performance, and I'm used to it running at 60, so I'll obviously lose that. Pretty soon, I'm planning on getting a 4K TV, and when I put that into fidelity mode, I would love to be convinced to play future games in fidelity. I would love to have my opinion changed.
So just to dumb it down for some of our listeners, what would be the difference in Spencer playing Miles Morales on his PS4 and now his PS5 in performance mode?
Just the fact that the frame rate's doubled.
Yeah.
So if you were playing it on PS4, you'd be playing it in 30 FPS with nothing else. You'd just be playing it in 30 and not in 4K. If you had a PS4 Pro, you'd be playing it in 1440, which is what the PS4 Pro outputs it at. So not true 4K, but near as damn it, and at 30 with no ray tracing. Whereas the performance mode would mean he'd be at true 4K generally most of the time, unless it gets a little bit hectic, and he'd be playing at 60.
Because we've all paid £450 for the pleasure of playing this game, because it is the only game that I've got anyway. I know you boys have both got Demon Souls, but we could have got this on PS4. I know, Davey, you've got the Pro. I think I've still got the original. Spencer, you probably have the original as well.
I sold mine. I had
sold
the original,
yours to
but
get
I sold
the
it
PS5.
now, yeah.
Was the outlay, do you feel worth it for those extra frames?
100%. Obviously, the extra frames, those are really what mattered to me, because PC gamer. Mostly, the game I was most excited for PS5 was Demon Souls. It wasn't even Spider-Man. And Demon Souls isn't on the PS4. So I kind of had to get the PS5 to play that at all. So that's why the purchase was more worth it for me.
I'm slightly playing devil's advocate with my questioning. I know you're right, because I've bought the PS5.
Yeah.
I've played it in both now. I've got the Platinum, just as Spencer has. I played it for the first time through in Fidelity, and I never thought I'd want to do anything differently. And so the second time, Spencer was saying to me in private, "Oh, you're missing out. Performance is so good. You're such a mug playing it in 30, blah, 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 blah." So, started New Game Plus in performance mode. And you're right, the combat feels really smooth. the swinging feels really smooth. And it does feel, everything feels like as if it's got an extra sheen of like butter to it. Feels extra silky smooth, right? But there's some major disadvantages to that mode, in my opinion. The first is the game looks like a PS4 game without it. It looks like I was playing it on my PS4 Pro. Sure. I was like, it doesn't look any different to a PS4 Pro. I might as well just bought it on my PS4 Pro. It looks exactly the same.
I'd agree with that because I started off in performance mode and I thought, what have I paid this money for?
Everything looks flat in comparison. All the textures look really flat. They look really lifeless, and the lighting engine just isn't there. And so it just doesn't have the same pop. Nothing has the same pop. So you never get those moments where you're like, oh my God. And you never get those. Whereas literally swinging around, the most mundane thing looks spectacular. That's the one thing. The second thing is when you use your venom powers in 60, it doesn't stay on the same frames for long enough. So it doesn't have the same impact. When you put it in 30, because the animation's slower, because obviously there's half the frames there, it looks epic. It looks really epic when you smack somebody with a venom punch. Whereas in 60, it just seems to go really quick because obviously it's moving, the frames are going so fast. So it flows more and the impact feels less than in Fidelity. But granted, part of that could be the extra effects that are in with the ray tracing that's coming off the venom powers and the extra visual flair that you get with the extra particle effects that you get on Fidelity that you don't get in performance. What would be interesting is that when you get your 4K TV, if you give it a go and see how you feel, because I've just gone back to play Spider-Man Remastered, booted it up yesterday for the first time, and it's blown me away. And that game is a 2018 game, we're in 2020 now, going into 2021, and it looks sensational. And I'm smiling ear to ear, just going around in my Ben Reilly suit, which is the best suit in that game, and swinging around and just taking out bad guys and just thinking, Jesus Christ, New York's never looked this good in the summer. And it's just fantastic. It's just actually fantastic. So I will be interested to hear kind of your thought on this as we go on to see if you change your opinion. But have you got anything you want to say back to me on this? Because I've kind of been ranting about this and put my point out there. Have you got any counterpoint to this?
Your opinion's valid. Obviously, the points you make sense. I'm not sure if the whole animations having more impact make a lot of sense with the frame rate. I'm not sure if that's entirely how it works. Maybe the ray tracing does make it feel better, but I'm not sure if the frames would, per se. The first thing I'm going to do when I get a 4K TV is try out Fidelity mode on every game that I've already played. So Spider-Man, Demon's Souls. I'm going to go back and see the difference, because that's why I'm getting it. Obviously, that's why I'm getting the TV. I want to see it. And I would love to be swayed. I would love for it to blow me away so much that I stop caring about 60 FPS, but I cannot see it happening. Because that 60 FPS feels so smooth.
I think the jump between technologies these days are just getting less and less, really, aren't they? You know,
yeah, they
compared to the days where you went from standard definition to HD, like everyone was wiping their eyes and feeling like this is a new adventure. This is something completely different. But the move from what Spencer's seeing to what we're seeing, the jump I don't feel is as big. But when you have the luxury of a 4K TV and you can put it in Fidelity mode, then you would, because it is stunning.
The 4K isn't the big thing. I honestly think it's the ray tracing. Because the 4K, when you're playing in performance mode, things are at 4K then. If you're just standing still, it's definitely at 4K. But you know the part after you just beat Rhino for the first time, and he's swinging that rap track's playing, and you're on that lamppost, and you're kind of looking around. And so that was at the point I switched it back to Fidelity. I was just like, holy shit. Because literally every single building, the glass in all the buildings and everything just came to life. And I was like, holy shit, this is what it is. It's not the 4K, because the 4K I'm static, I'm not doing anything. So it's going to be a 4K picture. So it's just the ray tracing I'm turning on, lowering down the frame rate. And my God, it was eye-opening. It was eye-opening. And especially as coming off PS4, which I've been on for such a long time. And granted, this is probably part of the reason why I'm so in Fidelity's camp, is because I played everything on 30.
Yeah.
It's the only games that I play at 60 are shooters, because they're built at 60. But most things are built around 30 frames for PlayStation. You talk about like God of War, that's 30. Uncharted games are all 30. Last of Us, when it originally launched, was 30.
What about
Last of Us 2's 30.
fighting games?
Well, fighting games and shooting games are a little different. They're
You
different,
need
aren't
the
they?
frames,
They're 60.
don't you? Yeah.
Yeah, you need them for that. For anything that's like a single player story, which is mostly what I'm using my PlayStation 4, it's mostly in 30. And I'm kind of used to that experience. So going to 60, and also what doesn't help is that I'm completely blind to frame rate.
Spend all this money and you're like, yeah, I'm actually blind. My eyes aren't that
No,
great.
no.
I have to wear glasses
I'm-
for the majority of my life. Like,
No, I'm not that kind of blind. But I looked at a tech demo for I looked at a Digital Foundry video, and it was a comparison with Ghost of Tsushima, where they're playing it on a PS4 Pro and a PS5. So PS5 is in 60, and on PS4 Pro it's on 30. And I struggled. I could notice it on certain things, but I struggled to see the difference, right? And I showed Spence, and Spence's like, oh my god, it's so obvious. It's so obvious.
Yeah.
And so it could be that maybe it just doesn't have the same effect to me. I could definitely feel it when I played Miles Morales. I could feel it in the combat and every single thing. It felt better in performance.
You felt it in your wallet, definitely.
Yeah, 100%. But I think it's just that ray tracing. I think it's just so effective. And that's my take on it. But it'll be really interesting to see what you think of this as we go forward, Spence, in future conversations. When you get your 4K TV, you get it all set up. Try it out. Let us know what you think.
Yeah, I definitely will. I'm hoping to like come over yours at some point and just see your TV before I do. Because if I don't even notice a difference or I don't like it that much, there's not a lot of point in me making the investment.
But then you've got the comparison between, a monitor being at 28 inches. I don't know what monitor you got at home, but and then a TV at 65 inches. The difference between the two is, there's going to be a lot of determining factors whether you think one is better than the other, definitely. And then the quality of the screens that you buy, and it's not just this is 4K, this isn't 4K. The argument is way more complex than that.
Yeah, it's way more nuanced. I think the big thing you'll be able to tell immediately is just in the lighting. The lighting and the ray tracing is just so obvious, even to me. And I'm a complete noob when it comes to this stuff. And it was night and day.
I've seen ray tracing in action in Miles. Like, even though I'm playing 1080p, I still see the differences with ray tracing, and it is astonishing. Like when you're on a building, looking at your reflection, seeing the pedestrians on the floor behind you and the cars driving past, it is amazing. But when I'm swinging through the city or when I'm in a fight, I'd care a lot more about the frame rate. So the ray tracing doesn't do an awful lot for me unless it was like a proper cutscene, slower paced game like Last of Us.
Personally, I don't feel like Spider-Man is a game that you need the frames. Like, as much as you are in combat and you are fighting, I don't feel like you're counting those frames in any way. As Davey said, it's not a fighter, it's not a shooter. I think if we moved on to, the next Street Fighter, or we're playing the next, Call of Duty on our PlayStation 5s, then I think you'd want the frames.
Yeah. I mean, I like feeling the 60 FPS in any kind of game.
Sure.
But obviously that's a biased opinion. I think we all have biased opinions in this regard.
Well, yeah, of course we do. It's all our own personal opinions, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you're used to something and something changes, then of course,
Yeah.
You're going to sway with what you're used to, aren't you?
I will say I have a slight bad experience with Fidelity mode because obviously I played throughout performance, and then after I beat the game and I was doing side missions, I thought, let me try out Fidelity. I actually decided to do it right after I got the Prowler suit. And as soon as I swapped to Fidelity, that's when I fell through the world in the game. That's what caused me to fall through the entire world. I'd imagine the whole world reloaded, and because I was underground, it loaded me under the world, and that's why it did it. But that might have swayed my opinion a little bit, because it caused that issue.
I know, speaking in our chat, you have mentioned a couple of times that you've had bad experiences with Spider-Man. Thinking back, the only time that the game has ever glitched for me was when I was running alongside a boat chasing the Tinkerer, and I fell through the boat. But that was on Fidelity mode. That was the only time the game actually bugged for me.
Yeah, I've only had one bug playing on Fidelity. It's been absolutely fine. It's been a great experience. But you've had a cacophony of errors, haven't you?
Yeah, I've had a good handful of bugs. I had one. I think the first bug I got was when you find out, you go to where the Tinkerer's parents' shop, I think it is, and you go on the laptop and you find out her past, you find out her motives. After using the laptop, I couldn't move with Miles. He wouldn't move, so I had to reload a checkpoint. I've had a few issues at the start of the game. I was fighting the enemies with the venom in New Game Plus, And then during the venom punch, the next cutscene began. And that caused my venom to just stay on the entire time. So I just had a venom trail on my arm.
What we have got to take into consideration, I know we're trying to, point out bugs here. We're at the immediacy of kind of a generation, right? People haven't got used to what a PlayStation 5 can ultimately do, Like if you look at how a console progresses over time, we're at the complete start. So I can kind of accept seeing these bugs from time to time.
Oh, I can fully accept it.
You're totally right. I mean, we got this entire generation to look forward to that we can say in 7 years' time, look how far we've come from this, That's what's going to be interesting to see how they push these machines to the absolute limit.
Or what happens when we get a PS5 Pro.
True. And then we're in 8K for everything.
Know what I'm saying? Like...
I will say that I don't think, obviously down the line, we're going to be getting better looking games. I don't think we should look towards games not having the same bugs. Because obviously, I think these bugs I've experienced in Miles Morales, they'll get ironed out in patches. Every game, even towards the end of PS4's life cycle, and PS3 and every console, they still have bugs. It's a fact of us playing the games on release before they get ironed out and patched out of the game.
Completely agree on that.
Days Gone, when it released, was an absolute shithouse. It was totally trashed. It ran really poorly. It wasn't optimized. It was really, really bad. And so it was reviewed terribly. When I got to it 6-7 months later, it was great. I really had no issues with it at all. And so you're right, I can see that being an ongoing thing.
I think we've come to accept that a lot of the time when we buy a game, it's not the finished product. And personally, coming from a cartridge generation, I hate that. I really hate the idea that I'm laying out now up to £70 for a game that isn't finished.
No, I know what you mean.
I understand that the developers say they're gonna, finish the game. They're gonna add more content. They're gonna make the game better. And of course, you've got to take that into consideration that they are further developing the games. Sonic was a one and done. Mario was a one and done. And then the developers can move on to the next game and make more money off that. But these days, it is such a hard pill to swallow that you are buying an unfinished game. Look at games like Destiny. When that originally came out, was that even a game when that came out?
I suppose that's a different thing, though, isn't it? Like, for a single-player game, the game is there. And sure, you may get additional content with it, so you may get, a roadmap or something like that. But for a live service game, I think you're totally bang on. In terms of the patches and the bugs, certain of it you could probably put down to being COVID, where they can't playtest like they used to. So you could probably put that as a little bit of a allowance to it. I think going forward in the generation, these games are just getting so complicated that there's so many ways that you can break a game. You can only test it so many different ways, and people do some dumbass shit. And so there's going to be something that they thought, well, why is this person doing this at this point? This is totally random.
I think I can allow it more when you're playing a multiplayer game. So if COD came out and it's broken, you can understand that because there's so many variables, because multiplayer, it's hard to test that, right? On the scale that is played. But a single player, narrative-driven game, really? Like, they should have played test that. I shouldn't be falling through the boat, should I? Because that should have been played. And it'll be played exactly the same way by so many people, right? So that's going to happen quite often. I think with multiplayer, you've got so many variables, and I can totally forgive that. World of Warcraft, when that goes wrong, can completely forgive that, right? League of Legends, completely can forgive that. And I'm just talking about PC games. Let's talk about a PlayStation-centric multiplayer game, COD, Fortnite. Those games I can forgive. But when it comes to a single-player narrative game where everyone is playing a linear storyline and something goes wrong, it's much harder to forgive that.
I think, unfortunately, that's just the world we live in. Yeah. And we just got to accept that there are bugs now. And you don't get the best quality product. You get it months later after release. But that's the trade-off you get for being part of the conversation early and to experience a story which is actually phenomenal day and date. Whereas a lot of the world are still looking for their PS5s.
Yeah.
Well, that's why we're able to do these podcasts, because we played it early doors. We're blessed.
Exactly.
We're blessed in that respect.
I don't think any of us would be able to say that their experience was hampered in any way because of these bugs. I mean, Spence, you had all these bugs. Did it affect your experience or your opinion of the game?
Well, the one bug obviously changed my experience because it actually hindered my progress. whereas I couldn't move. But all I had to simply do was hit start, load checkpoint, and it reloaded me exactly where I was. It took 2 seconds to fix, and then I just progressed as normal. I actually kind of disagree with you, Phil, whereas I think in a multiplayer game, like a competitive game like Call of Duty Fortnite, a bug could hinder your performance in the game, whereas in a single player game, you just reload the checkpoint. You can't reload, there's no checkpoints in multiplayer games.
I'm not sure that was my point. My point was more that I can forgive bugs being in multiplayer games because there's so many variants.
Yeah, I understood what you meant, but fundamentally, I'm not sure if I agree with like how you mean, how bugs could be caused a lot easier in multiplayer games.
Sure.
But I'd rather see a bug in a single player game than a multiplayer game.
Oh yeah, I love online multiplayer games, and when there's a bug, it affects me a lot more than a single player narrative game. 100%.
Yeah. I think this is something that we'll have to just keep an eye on as the generation progresses. And you never know, we could be surprised by the fact that things are launching in a great state, but I think we'll just have to keep an eye on this as we move forward. So with the introduction of Miles, we get introduced to a whole subset of new powers and abilities that Peter never had in Spider-Man on PS4. So Spence, what were your favourites to use, and what did you think of the combat in comparison to the original?
Well, the combat, I preferred a lot in this game, because the Venom powers, I have a thing for that. I love those powers. Being able to use electricity and shit in your moves feels fucking great. And like the animations when you do the finishes on opponents, and like this one specifically where he kicks them up and then he jumps and just places his hands on them. He doesn't punch them or anything. He just kind of touches them and zaps them. That's cool. Obviously, before you could just kick people up and do air attacks to people. Now you have an actual AoE, so you can launch multiple people in the air, and it's just really efficient. Like say you're on a building and you have to kill a few people without taking damage. Blast them all in the air with the Venom jump, and you just punch, kick, they got off the building, go to the next one because they're still stuck in the air with the Venom. It's amazing. I actually love the combat in this game. I think it's a big improvement on the first.
Did you find when you were approaching these camps, though, the bad guys were very much in a bunch, so it lent itself much more favourably to Miles's Venom powers, so you could come over above them and then Venom punch down and hit them all at once, as opposed to when you were Peter, they were all sort of spread out, weren't they?
I definitely favoured in that aspect. One big thing I liked in those big groups was to just go camouflage, sneak into the middle of them, and then use my Venom Blast, which is a move they don't really tell you get. I had to find out from looking at a trophy, and then I know Davey found out because I told him. I'm not sure if you even knew you had it, Phil.
Yeah, the Venom Blast, that was eye-opening. You get it as part of, after the interrogation scene, just after that, you burst out of your chair using that power. Spence, I was screen sharing, and you were watching me do pretty much the end fight just before you end up fighting the Tinkerer. And I was fighting this group of enemies, I was getting my ass kicked a little bit. And you're like, why don't you just, use your ultimate move? I was like, well, what are you talking about? And you just hold L1 triangle circle and just absolutely obliterate an entire squad. And I thought, Jesus Christ. And I'd gone, most of the game since then without even knowing I had it.
Yeah, the game doesn't really tell you get the power. You kind of just have to figure it out. I only found out because of a trophy, which was overpowered, I think the trophy is, and you have to just use Venom attacks.
When doing New Game Plus, it does make it pretty damn obvious that you've got that power.
Yeah.
Because you've got to press that to burst out of that chair. But for some reason, it just didn't twig with me that would be an ongoing power. I don't know about you, Phil. Did you run into that, or did you pick up on that straight away?
To be fair, I thought throughout Miles Morales, he was slightly overpowered to the enemies I was fighting. I don't know if that was down to my playstyle, because I'm very much someone who will go through and complete all the side missions. I didn't feel like anything was really that much of a challenge. Going back to the original game, I remember when I was introduced to kind of the bruisers, the bigger guys that would take a bit more fight to them. In Miles, they just fly off you. They're so easy. There's no challenge to them. Even the guys later on where there's shields and they've got the axe, I just didn't feel like they were any sort of threat in the game.
I think one of the big reasons for that could be that, just as you were saying about the Venom powers, they're so useful and they're good for everything. There's one Venom power for literally every single enemy that you fight. Sword guys, you got to use the dash. For the big guys, you got to use the Venom punch. For everyone else, you just use the Venom jump and just pull them up in the air and take them out.
And even when you go back to the camps, you get spotted, you can just turn invisible.
Yeah.
Peter didn't have that. Peter would get found, With Miles,
True.
he could just go up high, turn invisible, and then you basically got the reset, and you can heal yourself.
You could heal yourself in the original.
Yeah, but you go invisible and heal yourself, and you've just got the reset.
Yeah, true, good point. I think with Peter, the difference is you've got way more gadgets. So with Peter, you've got, when you go into a situation, you've got to use your scan ability, map out where everyone is, and figure out what gadgets you're going to use at certain situations and plan a bit more.
Yeah.
Whereas with Miles, you could just jump in, just do it. That's what I found.
I very much felt that Miles's gadgets were a lot better than Peter's.
Oh, wow.
I felt like
That's mad.
You could put those remote bombs down. Like, I haven't got to the New Game Plus, so I haven't got the extra additions to those items. But the remote bombs and the VR troopers, or whatever, what were they called? The holograms.
The holograms.
Yeah, they're so good. Like, you just chuck a couple of down and you just watch it happen. I didn't feel like there was too much threat in the game. That's my personal opinion.
I think that Peter had way better gadgets. I think the impact webs that you had with Peter's was so good. Just be able to take out big enemies immediately and just impact web them to the side of buildings. To be able to crowd control better with your holo drones, that you get your little drones that circle around you and fight enemies. I think that Peter had way better gadget spread. What it meant is that when you were in the middle of a fight with Peter, you were constantly then holding R1 and going into your menus and looking at what options to use. Kind of slow combat down a little bit more. Whereas with Miles, it was a case of, I'm just going to hit this guy 5 times, get my venom meter, venom launch everyone. It just felt more seamless. Yeah. So combat encounters then kind of went a bit quicker. Whereas with Peter, you kind of had to think a bit more about it.
Yeah, I can definitely agree to that, because I remember one of the last camps that I was struggling on. I must have done it 20 odd times, right? And I remember just every point you would do a couple of hits, and then you're straight into the menus to choose the next item with Peter, aren't you? But I felt with Miles, you could just beat the camp. I haven't really come up with... I'm not on the hardest difficulty with New Games Plus, so potentially that's there. But currently, I haven't found the same struggle that I found with the original game.
I think the venom powers definitely make combat a lot easier. I would say that I think combat's a lot better with Miles Morales than I do think it is with the original, just because of how fluid it feels. Whereas going into the menus on the original, setting up the stealth sections I think are a lot better with Peter, because you've got more options. You've got more things that don't break stealth. Whereas with Miles, you've got the remote bombs and that's it. Everything else, you try and use a gravity well, we try and use a holo drone, it breaks the stealth immediately. Whereas with Peter, you've got your impact webs, which still keep stealth. Holo drones, I don't think they do, but pretty much everything else you've got does keep your stealth. And so it becomes super important, and those missions are way better with Peter than they are with Miles. But general combat for me goes to Miles.
Personally, a lot of the time, I didn't feel like I needed to be in stealth with Miles. But I think with Peter, even outside of the stealth missions themselves, I felt like starting off the camps under stealth to eliminate the first wave was always a good choice. With Miles, did not feel like I needed to do that. I jump in, start blasting. Easy.
Yeah, totally agree with that.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Which was your favourite venom power and gadget?
I think for me, I quite enjoyed the venom power, which you punched and you basically chased them. I can't remember the exact name to that.
Do you mean the venom dash with circle?
Could be the venom dash then. I think that the visuals on that and the effectiveness during the fights and maybe my play style, I enjoyed that the most. And then when it came to the armory, it was definitely those remote mines, because I beat the end boss without really beating the end boss with those remote mines.
I didn't use the remote mines on the final boss, but they were still definitely my favorite, just because they made everything so much easier. Like placing them on the electrical boxes and leading people there, just to wipe them out quickly. It feels good. They feel nice to use, and using them to like place on the big brutes whilst you take out the little men, just to get the big brute on his own later on. They're definitely the best weapon, I think.
Yeah, because you just pop it on an enemy, and as soon as anyone else comes close, they just zap them down. It was. I felt they were very overpowered, to be honest. I like the idea that maybe they would stun, but generally at the level I was playing, they killed.
They kill in stealth, and they kill if you put a couple of hits in beforehand. They're a good way to finish off people. I agree with you. I think the remote mines were amazing. I loved them, and they just gave me too many. They gave me flashbacks to the combat that worked so well in Spider-Man PS4. A gadget wheel is actually really good, whereas I never used the gravity well. I thought it was pointless.
Yeah,
the holo people were okay, but I'm trying to keep a score multiplier, and they just kind of fuck up my score multiplier. So They just did my head in, so I hardly ever used them. So it was all about remote mines for me. My venom power that I loved the most was probably venom jump. I loved
Really?
it. I thought it was great. I just used it all the time. I loved getting people up in the air. And my normal thing was always get them up in the air, web them like mad, and then use the hold triangle to like slam them into the ground to stick them. And that was my kind of preferred way of fighting. And so I loved that. The venom punch though, big shout out to venom punch. Love it. So usable literally everywhere. Anyone you fight, you know you can venom punch him. Even like a big guy with a shield, just venom punch him, he's fine. It's just busted. And especially as you move up in your upgrade tree, and you get to a point then you can offset one of your abilities, one of your suit mods, as being when you use a venom power, it leaves a nodule, a little node of venom power out in the environment, so you can just constantly have venom. It just becomes busted. You can just take out entire swarms with nothing.
What's your opinion on the name? Because in the Spider-Man universe, we already know there is something already called Venom. So to call something that's completely different Venom, it doesn't really make sense to me, because I don't know Miles, right? And then they said, now you get a Venom punch. So I'm thinking there's gonna be some kind of symbiote here, right? Has he got some kind of, black, red, a different color? What's going on with that? Why have they chosen to go down that route with the naming conventions?
Well, venom makes sense because it's a spider, isn't it? So
Yeah.
a spider, when it stings, injects with venom. So it makes perfect sense to me why it's called Venom, especially as Venom isn't in this universe yet.
It makes sense if there wasn't already a character called Venom.
But he's not in this universe yet.
Yeah, but they call it Venom in the comics as well, and in the movie. For all the comics, it's been called his Venom Shock.
Yeah.
But obviously,
I think it's fine.
Davey's right
think
with they do it just because that's what a spider does.
It,
Whereas
like,
obviously
it,
Peter's the spider
like,
without venom, and then
contextually,
Miles is a venomous spider.
Contextually, it does make sense, right? To call that Venom, but you have a character called Venom. You would have thought there'd be a different name for this ability. I'm not suddenly going to start calling something...
What does Rhino call it? Fizzy Pops or something?
Yeah.
Hit me with your snappy Fizzy Pops. He's like, Fizzy Pops? So I think it sounds cool. I think at the end of the day, it just got to sound cool, doesn't it?
I'm not suddenly going
to sound cool and look cool.
I'm not suddenly going to call it the Carnage Kick, or the
Oh,
there we go, or the
Spider-Man 2. You can take these.
There we go.
You can take these things, Insomniac. You can take these.
Hey,
Free ones. Got any more, Phil?
Insomniac are probably listening after all my tweets.
That's a good point, actually. This is probably a good thing to mention. So, yeah, you had your Twitter blew up, didn't it, recently?
Yeah,
Tell us about it, Phil.
I was very lucky. I think I must have just caught them on the day their social media marketing guy was on Twitter. I made sure to @mention them, and I was saying that we were going to record a Spoilercast for their game, and they very kindly liked and commented on my tweet, and it ended up with today 372 likes, 15 retweets. So hopefully, or potentially, we might have an extra couple of listeners because of that. So thank you very much to Insomniac, and if you are listening, cheers, guys. That's amazing. I really appreciate that. Equally, I also got a like from one of the I think it was the creative director, Brian Horton, as well. So shout out, Brian. I appreciate the like and the comment on my tweet. You guys have done a great job on the game.
I think we all know why I didn't get any likes and replies on my Spider-Man tweets. All of mine were just about the bugs that I experienced throughout the game. And if they were to reply to me, I think they'd probably be a bit more of hate mail. Like, why are you showing this to people? Give us a week, we'll fix it, please.
If anything, they might be coming to you for a job, Spence. They might say, actually, this guy's breaking everything known to man. He's had more bugs than anyone else we've ever seen. Maybe we should get him on the team. Playtester. Get you doing some of your random stuff that you've obviously been doing. Were you hanging off buildings off the side with L2? Dropping down your web and trying to spider kiss a load of the passers-by? Was that what you were doing?
Did you do that?
I can't comment. I will say it doesn't work. But that's all I'm going to say about the matter. But I didn't have any bugs doing that, so I don't know if maybe that was play tested beforehand.
So, boys, what are your favourite suits in the game? Not quite as big a deal as the plot, but I'd like to know nonetheless.
This was one of the comments that came back off my tweet, actually. I had someone comment their favourite suit, and I thought this was kind of a good discussion point. I've not actually unlocked all the suits within Miles Morales just yet, But my top 3 so far, and the suit I've been playing the majority or the vast majority of the game, is the 2099 suit. I can see you shaking your head.
It's not a terrible suit, but it's not my choice.
I don't know what it is, but 2099 just speaks to me. I wore the 2099 in the original game, and I know Davey very much hates that suit. And as soon as I got it in Miles, I just felt like that was the right suit to wear. And actually, I included that within the picture within my tweet to Insomniac, and I did get a couple of people mention that was their favorite suit as well. So that's number 1 for me.
The 2099 suit has never been good, ever. And that is the same for this game. The 2099 suit is just a try-hard suit. It's just a try-to-look-cool suit. And I think, Phil, that you're trying to live back in the 90s when you were young. And the problem is, you put a hoodie on him, and that's it. All it is just put a hood over a costume and make his eyes glow like he's Spawn. It's the most 90s costume I've ever seen, and not in a good way. Not in like a Ben Reilly suit, which is also a 90s suit, but that is with a bit of style, bit of class, bit reserved. Whereas that suit, I just can't agree with it. I just cannot. Not for your number 1. Jesus Christ.
I'm not sure that's the most try-hard suit that Miles has, because there's such a thing as a strike suit, and that is horrendous. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
I think I know. It's the one. Is it like armored? Is it like an armored suit?
It's armored, and it looks like it's got a little tie on it. It looks absolutely horrendous.
That suit's horrendous. I thought you'd like that one.
No, don't be silly. Miles Morales, 2099, tops the slot for me. Then we got the animated suit. I thought that one looked epic when I was swinging around.
You went for that one over the Enter the Spider-Verse suit.
I thought it looked epic because it's quite a juxtaposition compared to kind of the real world while you're swinging around. I think it does kind of bring you out and, you know, show you that you are playing a Spider-Man game, that you are swinging around in a cel-shaded kind of character within this kind of more realistic world.
Yeah, that's fair. I can respect that choice. I swung around for a little bit in that suit. I thought it was pretty cool. I thought it was pretty neat. If I had to choose between both that or the Enter the Spider-Verse suit, it would be the Spider-Verse suit, just because I did the thing that literally every single person has done, which is literally just put on What's Up Danger, put that suit on, jump off a building. I think literally every single person has done that in this game. I was going to share it and put it on social media, and I thought, everyone's done this. Like, this has got to be the thing that literally, as soon as people get that suit, they put on that suit mod so it slows the animation down, put What's Up Danger on, and just jump off a building backwards. Like, everyone must do it. Literally everyone. It's like a rite of passage with this game.
I think as soon as you get a suit, you want to do a mission in that suit at least before you start judging it.
A mission? I do a little swing.
A swing? One swing and you're done.
One and done, mate. One and done. That's how I do it.
But you've got to think the amount of hours and the amount of effort and the amount of probably references these suits have to comic books that we've never read, you know? So why not give them a chance and see if they hit home? I was even swinging around in the end suit, which I think's an horrendous suit. That's the one where he's got the hoodie and he's got the combats on and the big boots. I'm not a fan of that suit. But I gave it a bit of time.
But I suppose this is what's probably going to become apparent from this, is that all three of us have got different favourites, and I suppose that's the thing, that end suit's going to be someone's favourite. I mean, granted, you got no taste, and you probably should uninstall the game immediately and go outside and reevaluate your life, but it's going to be someone's favourite.
But in the original Spider-Man, you know, like, because we've got...
You had bad taste in the original one.
Because we got so much knowledge of that universe, right? We're used to those suits, and every single one of them probably meant something to me and you.
Yeah, it did. The Ben Reilly suit means so much to me. I love the Clone Wars saga. I love it. And so it just means so much to me, even though a lot of people hate that saga. But I just love having web shooters on the outside of your gloves. I just think it looks cool. It's proper 90s, but it looks cool. Whereas you went for the 2099 suit, which is just an act against God. It's so bad.
And to be honest, I don't know a hell of a lot about Spider-Man 2099. I feel like we're coming up to Christmas, and that's a potential gift, you know, option for people.
I might just buy you Superior Spider-Man, and just not, because it's a better suit as well. I'm hoping that Superior Spider-Man's in the next game, because that suit is so nice, so good. It's black into red. It looks so good. Whereas the 2899 costume, I feel sorry for whoever had to ink it. I feel really bad for whoever had to pencil and ink it, because it's just horrendous to look at. It's horrendous.
I love a graphic novel, as do you. And my only reference to the 2099 original Spider-Man suit is Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions on PS3, which I loved. Up to these two Spider-Man games, that was probably my favorite Spider-Man game.
Wow, better than Spider-Man 2 on the PS2.
I don't really remember playing that much. The only other Spider-Man game that I've got any kind of memory of, for good or bad reasons, is probably the one on the Game Boy.
Oh, I don't remember that one. Do you remember? Did you ever play the one on the PS1? There was one on the PS1 that was there was the sky. You were on top of a skyscraper, couldn't see the floor. There was clouds underneath you, and there's clouds above you, and so you were just webbing the clouds. You were webbing the air, but it was really good. It was a really good game.
I think everyone talks about Spider-Man 2. I think it is.
2.
Yeah, that's
Spider-Man
the
2,
one
yeah.
everyone arcs back to on the GameCube. But I probably did play it. I've got so many games, and I'm probably getting to that age now where I'm forgetting a few things, and I don't really remember that game. The games that I think of when I think of Spider-Man is obviously this one, because it's the newest one, the latest one on the PS4, going back to Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, and then the original on the Game Boy, because I remember that game, as with most games that were on the Game Boy, just incredibly difficult. And I wanted to play it because I loved Spider-Man. It was so annoying, so frustrating.
This is going off topic, but this is a class game that I hope you've got in your collection. Do you remember the Mega Drive games, right, for X-Men and X-Men 2?
I've just forgotten my favourite game. Oh, can we just scrap everything I've just said? One of my favourite Spider-Man games is Maximum Carnage.
Oh, Spider-Man, well, that goes without question. That's in everyone's favourites.
Oh, my God.
That's an unwritten, you don't have to say that. That's just
Maximum Carnage. Now, that is a
one of the
Spider-Man.
hardest games known to man, but also one of the most satisfying.
For all our listeners that don't know what Maximum Carnage is, it's Streets of Rage with a Spider-Man skin and a Venom skin. Player 1 gets to be Spider-Man, Player 2 gets to be Venom, and it's a side-scrolling beat-em-up.
And it is incredibly hard, but incredibly amazing.
Oh.
And it stands up today. Why don't they just put that out with a HT skin? I'll be on that like a fly on shit.
You can't really class it as a proper Spider-Man game because it doesn't really follow any Spider-Man story other than it's a side-scroller beat-em-up and it looks like Spider-Man.
Well, it's got Carnage. Carnage is trying to take over New York, and you got to stop him, and you and Venom team up to take him down. I mean, what more do you need? It's got everything there.
I mean, all the bad guys are in it. It's the same as Turtles in Time. It's that type of game, right? You walk forward or walk to the right. You've got to beat people up, which are completely nameless people, and then you have a bad guy at the end of the level. Same as Streets of Rage.
You better know they've all got metal pipes.
They do have metal pipes, a lot of them.
They're all ready to deal some damage, but they actually can kill you in that game. Those metal pipes are really effective.
A little bit different to this game.
What was your final suit that you loved?
So top to bottom, 2099, number one.
Terrible.
The animated suit.
Decent.
And then I'd probably just go the classic suit.
Okay. So just the default one.
Just the default. Well, it's not actually the default one, is it? Because the default
you
one,
get it as part of the story, don't you?
Yeah, you get it as part of the story. It's not the one where he's got the blue bomber jacket, and it's not.
I love that suit.
Not a fan. I'm talking, the kind of just the black suit, the black.
The main one is part of the main story.
Correct.
It's on the cover art and everything.
Yes. Yeah, I'd go along with that. Because I'm looking at the list right now, and I haven't unlocked the programmable matter suit or the Miles Morales 2020 suit. So maybe those would take the top spots, but I haven't got to them yet.
Well, I'll tell you now, the programmable matter suit, I was really hyped for because it looks great when you're looking at it, on the little tiny section you get on the suit selector before you select it. As soon as you select it, it's not that good.
No.
It's not that good. It's a bit of a letdown. The 2020 suit is in mine and Spencer's list.
Okay.
As far as I know, because I know we've both used it.
That's the one with the little bomber jacket.
With these games, with both this and the original Spider-Man, I pick a suit and I stick with that suit until the end. Unless there's something else that comes up that really tickles my fancy. So for the original Spider-Man, I played it with the Ben Reilly suit from start to finish. Loved it. As soon as I unlocked it, played it all the way through. For this, as soon as I unlocked the track suit, the TRACK, which is the white suit with the black bit in the middle, I love that suit. I adore it. I absolutely adore it. That was my number one suit. I played the first time I ran through the game in that suit.
I'm looking at it now, and I'm not sure what's drawn you to that suit. Like, I can look at, you know, a lot of the other suits, and I can pick out individual things that people might like, right? The tracksuit, I saw that suit, and as I said, I played most of them with at least one mission. I think that was the one I skipped. I really dislike that suit a lot.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I think it looks so cool. And I suppose the thing, I put it on, and I put on the classic, and then I put that one on, and I just thought, oh, this just looks so stylish. Just looks cool. And I really like, after Spider-Man PS4, where you had the white spider, I was so against the white spider when I first saw it, I really didn't like it. And then I love the advanced suit. It's one of my favourite Spider-Man suits now. So I think just having a bit of white in there, I just loved it. Loved it.
It is quite different, I'll give you that, to everything else. And that's maybe why you like it, because you're so used to seeing the atypical Spider-Man suit, isn't it? You know, you've got the spider on the front, it's the dark colours, it's the red, but this one is very different. So it's maybe
so.
that.
I don't know. It just really appealed to me. It just looked really nice. Then after that, my second choice is the 2020 suit. Mm-hmm. That's the one I played all of my New Game Plus through, and that is the Daft Punk suit. So it is, and I'm sorry to say this to myself, it is a 2099 suit, but it's only been featured on a variant cover for a 2099 comic. So it's never been used in an actual comic. So thank God it's not actually canon for 2099. So I can stick with my beliefs that 2099 is trash. That suit is immense.
It does look cool.
And the great thing about ray tracing is that the ray tracing in the helmet is there the entire time. So literally anytime somebody comes into frame or you're in a cutscene, you can see them all in the helmet. Mm-hmm. And when you get to a cutscene where he takes off his mask, he flips the visor up.
Oh, does he?
Or he takes the full helmet off, yeah. It's really well done.
That's one of the things I really liked, because, as I said, I played most of it in the 2099 suit. When he got to certain parts, he did pull down the hoodie and take off the mask. Like, they actually interact with the suits rather than it just being kind of like defaulted out.
Yeah, there's nothing more immersion breaking than when you go into a cutscene and they're wearing a different suit. Yeah. And you're like, what? That's not my suit. Whereas in this, they've really modelled it on every single different variant that you could be wearing.
Do you remember the first time that happened to you, where you noticed that what you were wearing represented in the cutscenes? Because I remember when it first happened to me.
I think the first thing that comes to mind is probably Metal Gear Solid 3, but I could be thinking about something different. In Snake Eater, depending on what camo you were using and stuff, you go into cutscenes and that camo and face paint would be there. And I remember being like, oh my God, this is insane. But I can't think of anything earlier than that. Don't know about you.
See, you've actually gone earlier than me. You know, like,
oh really?
For me, the first time that hit home was, I think, the first Uncharted. And it wasn't down to costumes. It was down to what gun I had on my back. Because I remember walking along and I probably had like the AK-47 or whatever on my back. And I remember going into shot, and normally they just cut out the guns and it's just your character. But he actually walked into shot with the gun, and I was like, that's me. That is actually who I'm playing.
Well, that was always something that was missing from Metal Gear Solid 3, because you'd always walk in and you always had like the SOCOM out.
Sure.
And you'd be like, oh, I'm not using the SOCOM right now. Yeah. I'm using like an M4 or something. So that was always different. But they had the camo and the costume right, which I always just blew me away at the time, especially with so many variations to it. I love that. It's just a little quality of life thing that just really makes a difference, I think, for selling you into a game, into the immersion of it. I love it. I really love it. Seeing the helmet for 2099 suit, for the 2020 suit, and him pulling it up, I was like, oh my God, they've put effort, like proper effort into this. Well done, Insomniac. Well done. My third suit, and I used it for the whole time I was in performance mode, so for a mission and a half, 2 missions, was the Bodega Cat suit. And I mostly did it because it kind of gave me flashbacks to the Ben Reilly suit, because he's got a hoodie on, but secondly, because he's got a cat.
Didn't it annoy you though, right? Because I had it on for quite a... Well, I've still got it on my character at the moment, and all the time you hear that cat meowing. Obviously, it relates to the suit, right? And it's meant to bring you into the story. You know, you've got a cat on your back, so why isn't it making noise? But it just annoys me already.
Oh, Spider-Man, that cat's sick. Hey, Spider-Man. the cat. The cat.
I love Spider-Man. I love Spider-Pig. I'm down for all those animals that are spider something. But I'm not about the suit.
Have you done a finisher with that suit on?
I haven't. No. Does he do something special?
Yeah. So when you do a finisher with it, you know, like the one where you like flip over them, and like Spencer was saying, you like electrocute them, and then they like fall on the ground.
Sure.
Well, the cat goes out of the backpack and lands on their head, and then gets back in the backpack.
Oh, right. He becomes part of it.
It's so cool. The only thing that's a little bit immersion breaking is you'll be in like a heart wrenching cutscene. You'll be like on the part where, you know, you're like on the floor with the tinker on your neck, and then you got the cat in the background.
Meowing.
he's in there, you know.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh Jesus. Or you'd be like going home to your mum or whatever, and you're taking off the suit on the roof, and there's the cat in there. You think, what's he doing with that cat? You know, just staying up there.
I think there was one bit actually. I had the suit on and I went back to the apartment, and you know when you go back home, your bag is on the roof, but you've got the same bag on your back, so you're like, it's doubled up there. But you couldn't not have it because you've got the cat in your backpack, and it's the same backpack. So we were talking about how cutscenes really mattered when you had the correct suit on at the right time. That actually broke it for me, because I was like, I've got the backpack on and now I've picked up another backpack.
Can you imagine how good it would be if they thought about, you get home and your mum's like, why is there a cat? Why have you got a cat, Miles? It's like, oh, I found this cat on the street, or something like that. You know, how cool would that be? I suppose that would just be an extra level to it. I suppose that would be just insane level of detail.
We haven't got Hideo Kojima, guest starring on this game, have we? You know.
Well, if we did, there would be some kind of reference, like 50 hours in, that you do some random thing, and then the cat would be dun 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 dun.
The cat would be the bad guy. Yeah.
Yeah, he's done.
Or
everything.
Actually, all along in the game, you're the cat.
Yes, you take off your mask at the end. You don't take it off, and you're the cat. And it's Miles. Miles is in the backpack, and he takes off his cat mask. Dun dun dun.
And
dun, dun, dun.
secretly, you're playing on a PS1.
Yeah. To beat one of the bosses, you have to plug in a PS1 controller. You have to somehow get some kind of some whatever that connection was to USB and plug that in.
Wouldn't that be hilarious if you made some sort of game where you had to use older peripherals from previous generations?
Oh my god! Imagine going down to my basement trying to find my PS1 and trying to find my original connection. I'll be like, oh my, this is ridiculous.
Kojima, you've done.
Damn you, Kojima!
Kojima, you've done it again.
People would kick off so fast.
I told you at the start of this podcast I'd bring it back to Death Stranding, and here it is.
It's always going to end up in Death Stranding. It's always going to end up there.
So, boys, my third favourite suit is the Bodega cat suit, and I had similar issues with you boys, which is I loved it because the cat, Spider-Man, being in my backpack, it's cool, it's funny, and he has his little mask, it's adorable. But yeah, for me as well, he did interrupt cutscenes. There was one pivotal one where I think I was on a window watching something, and the cat just snuck out the bag and waved his arms about, and I was like, what are you doing? I was like, calm down, Spider-Man.
I love how his name is Spider-Man and not Spider-Cat.
Yeah,
it's like,
I love it.
Why wouldn't you just name him Spider-Cat? Just for everyone's sake.
I love how the guy in the shop as well, as he kind of disses you when you first meet him, and he's named after the original Spider-Man. And then you sort it out for him, you find his cat, and he's like, you're okay too. But yeah, I did really like that suit, so that's probably my third favourite. Second is the classic suit, which I played through the entire game with until New Game Plus, which I'm glad I did, because the ending kind of changes depending on if you're wearing it or not, which I'd like to bring up later on.
You could just bring it in now, to be honest, mate, because I think you were totally bang on. So what happened in a private conversation was Spence said to me when I got to the end, I was screen sharing the end of my game. Spence finished it before me. He said, change to the classic suit. I said, no. The classic suit to me is the track suit. That's what I'm playing as. That's my suit.
Terrible.
So I didn't listen to him. Played the ending through. And now on New Game Plus, I was playing it on my own. And I was playing it through with my 2020 suit on. I thought, you know what? I'll just entertain him. I'll put it on just for the ending. And you were totally bang on. It gets ripped to absolute shit.
Is this the same kind of situation where, Davey, you tell me things in games and I completely ignore you because I think you're leading me up the garden path?
No.
You just don't trust Spencer.
No, I do. I do trust Spence. I just didn't think it would be as drastic as it actually was.
Yeah.
Whereas at the end, it looks like as if the spiders burnt into his flesh.
Yeah.
But insane. It's not. It's just that the red spider's there. But I did think for a second, God, is that burnt into his actual flesh now, in which case he can't ever go swimming
No.
because everyone will know it's him. He'll be telling. We already know. We've already established in this podcast that he's told everyone who lives.
He's not shy, mate.
Especially if he goes Olympic swimming, which he should do with his powers, make an absolute fortune.
Are spiders famous for swimming?
Well, they curl up into a ball and just get flushed down stuff. They're not bad.
He would
in
just be
water.
on the top of the water, wouldn't he? A bit like Daddy Longlegs, just kind of gliding across the top.
Yeah, but I mean, sure, that would give him away real fast, wouldn't it? That would give him away real
Yeah,
fast.
it
He jumps on the water and he's just on the top of the water. Yes, I think
Yeah,
that was
just skimming along it.
that guy's
Well,
Spider-Man.
they'd either
isn't
think they'd either think he's Spider-Man or he's Jesus. One of the two.
Yeah. Yeah. That guy's Jesus. No, I'm just Spider-Man. I've told everyone else. I might as well tell everyone I'm Spider-Man.
He's making up
The
as he goes
Harlem
along.
Spider-Man. Yeah, he is. Just winging it. He just gets out and everyone's like, wow, that was a really unique way of swimming. He's like, well, I am Spider-Man. Everyone's like, what?
And he's like, wait, I haven't told you. You might have been one of the only people I haven't told.
It's on my Twitter profile. It's my pinned tweet. Lol, I'm Spider-Man.
Anyway, mate, I'm glad you did it in the end. I'm glad you decided to entertain me.
So is that your number one suit then? The classic suit? Is that
No.
your favourite suit?
No, I'll go on to my favorite at the minute. But basically, the classic suit, when you use it in the end, when we first saw Spider-Man Miles Morales, when they teased it, it starts with like black, and then it pans into Miles grabbing something, and his suit kind of exploding in the venom, and that's what happens at the end. And it happens in any suit, it'll happen, but they won't get torn to shit like the classic suit. You'll just be led there injured in a suit. But with the classic suit, it's so drastic. It is literally, there's barely a suit on him. It's just threads. And I think for the first time playing through, it's best to wear that. But then, even in New Game Plus, you should at least beat it in that suit at least once. But that's still not my favourite suit. My favourite suit is the 2020 suit, the Daft Punk suit. And it wasn't my favourite suit until I started swinging at night time in that suit. Because the lights coming off of it, he has like LEDs going down his legs, on his feet, on his arms, and the helmet. The lights coming off him at night is amazing to look at.
Were you a big fan of the Iron Spider suit in the Spider-Man PS4? Because that's a similar feel, where he's got all the lights on him and stuff.
I wasn't as big a fan of that suit as I am of this one. But I did like that suit. I was quite a fan. But I'm biased because I like the Iron Spider anyway. But yeah, but that's my suits. That's my 3 favourite suits. So boys, what I'd like to discuss next is what happens after the credits, after you beat the game. Obviously, we see Harry suspended in kind of a tube, covered in symbiote, and Norman coming in, telling Kurt Connors, telling him, get him out of the tube now, that's my son. What are your boys' opinions on this, and what do you think, like, how do you think it's going to impact the next games?
I think the big thing that we learned from this is that Kurt Connors is treating him. So he says, Dr. Connors, and I thought, hold on a minute, Dr. Connors? And then I clocked then, and I was like, Dr. Connors, how many arms he got? And he only had one. And I was like, oh my god, it's the lizard. Hell yeah, it's the lizard. So for me, it means that, sure, we're not going to have Vulture, we're not going to have kind of the Sinister Six, which we've already had.
Sure.
But we're going to have some of his best rogues gallery in terms of the lizard. I love the lizard, and I really hope that they focus the Doctor character, just like with Doc Ock
Yeah.
in the original. I really hope they play up the relationship that Peter has with Kurt Connors in this next game. And I hope they have a lot of flashbacks to his time at ESU, whatever the university. Is it ESU that he went to in New York? I really hope they play back with flashbacks and stuff so we get this relationship with Kurt. I don't want it to be a case, even though this is a Spider-Man who's so far into his career, that he should have fought the lizard. I hope that he hasn't fought him yet. And I hope that Kurt hasn't undergone this transformation. And I hope that we get a lot of backstory into it.
If we are going down the lizard storyline, and kind of that regenerative gun that he ends up shooting himself with, we probably all end up with the Michael Morpheus storyline intersecting with that at some stage. So potentially it might go that way.
Actually, you just opened my eyes, because we could even get to the point where Spider-Man's having the transformation that's happening to him, where he's turning into Man Spider.
Man Spider, yeah.
And so he gets like the six arms. We could get that, and he's going to Kurt to be like, "Help me! I don't know what to do." And then he shoots him with the ray to kind of reverse him a little bit. Realizes, Christ, that's reversing him. That's fixing him up. I can fix my arm up. Treats himself, changes himself into a bloody lizard, and then we're game on.
An Australian lizard.
Game on.
A lizard.
Goddamn lizard.
I think
It's a bit of Bristol for you.
I think it'd be a really interesting kind of, storyline for them to go down. I know in the movie we had a version of the lizard, but none of us were satisfied by that, were we?
No.
Just straight no. We don't even need to talk about it.
You need to have the reason why Kurt Connors and the lizard is so effective is because it's just such a personal relationship, and they did that so well with Doc Ock in the last game, that this relationship should be even more than Doc Ock. It should be. It's so personal to Peter, and it should be something that he's been with this entire time. Why the 90s show was so good. The first episode he fights the lizard. It's the first episode. It's such a great villain for him. Someone who's superior to him in every single way.
We are avoiding the elephant in the room here with this questioning. I know we've jumped to Kurt Connors, but Harry and Norman Osborn are in that room. Are we going to get the Goblin?
This is what worries me a little bit. I'm not going to lie. Because the Green Goblin is Peter Parker's ultimate nemesis.
Correct.
Yeah.
It is. And I'm really worried about this. I'm really worried about how this is going to be implemented. You've got a lot going on in that end credits.
You do.
You've got the potential for two goblins with Harry and Norman. And it looks like a Venom symbiote.
And Kurt Connors is in there.
And Kurt. Now, what I don't want to happen is all of that to happen in one game. I do not want that. What would be the best thing for me would be that it focuses around Kurt with the rising of Norman into Green Goblin, and it ends with something drastic happening at the end with Norman, which forces Pete to use the symbiote to beat him. And that's how the game ends. That's what I'd like, because I want time with that suit. I want time with that suit before he realizes it's bad. Because the reason why Venom's so effective, and the reason why he works so well in the 90s animated cartoon compared to the movie, you had time with that suit before you realized this suit is changing him and making him evil and making him try to kill people and do all this different stuff that he wouldn't normally do. You need time for that. I don't want it done in... If it happens in a game, I want it at the start of the game and it to go at the end, rather than it be halfway through, you know?
Do we know, in the video game, do we know where the symbiotes come from? Because obviously in the 90s cartoon, it came from the moon. It came from when Joe Jameson's son went to the moon and they crash landed the shuttle on the New York Bridge.
In the Ultimate Universe, which this is kind of going a bit back and forth with the Ultimate Universe for certain bits, they're taking certain bits from that. In the Ultimate Universe, the Venom symbiote was a cure for cancer.
Yeah.
It doesn't take Spider-Man's like kind of core powers like it does in the 616 universe. It's just different. I want it to take his powers. I want classic Venom. I want it to be something that doesn't set off your spider sense. Can you imagine fighting something that can just come out of nowhere at any point in the game where it doesn't set off your spider sense? You could just be swinging and get taken out. You know in Miles Morales when you're swinging and then you get taken out by the Prowler and it's just a cutscene? I'd like that all the time. I'd like it to be just in case I'm just fighting. I know Venom's out there, but I can't sense him. I can't spider sense him. I can't pick him up on radar. Nothing. So I could just be fighting, just finish a fight, be like, holy shit. And then he just turns up. He's like, hey, Pete. You're like, oh my God. That'd be so good.
But who becomes Venom? If you're saying Harry is in the tube, then we haven't been introduced to like Eddie Brock.
I mean, they could slant it and have it as Harry, and in which case you've got that personal relationship immediately. You don't have to build anything. But they'd have to have time where Harry and Peter are together. And even though I want it hinted, obviously, that he's Venom, I want the suit on Pete first. I want it to go to Harry after, because then it's got his powers. I want to be fighting someone that's just like me, but better.
So the whole thing with Harry was that obviously he inherits the Goblin from his father, doesn't he? And then a lot of the time in kind of the comics and the 90s cartoon, Peter still thinks it's Norman in parts, you know? It's kind of, oh no, now I found out it's my best friend. that's against me rather than this multimillionaire who owns all these factories, you know?
Well, I suppose the thing is they need to build up in the next game. They need to build up the relationship with Harry, because at the moment, the only thing we've done is those science experiments that Harry left for us.
Yeah.
And that's it. So we got whereas we got a relationship with Norman, like he was pretty key to the major plot of the first game. So we got that relationship there, but we don't have anything with Harry. So they got to build that. And that's why I think if you centered it around the Lizard and had him as kind of the core villain for number 2, you could have number 3 then really be a big kind of trilogy kind of endpoint. But that's what I feel about it.
I reckon Lizard's going to be kind of like the Rhino in Miles Morales, where he's in there, but he's not going to be big. And I know that's not what you want, but that's how I feel it's going to go. And I reckon Harry as Venom will be the big villain. You'll end up killing Harry, and then that's what turns Norman into the Green Goblin in Spider-Man 3. And that's how I reckon they'd play it.
Oh, that would really work. That would work. That would give Norman some reason to get to that point that he has to use a experimental gas on himself to super soldier himself up.
Yeah, that's how I could see them doing it.
I definitely agree with what you're saying, Dave. The best parts of Spider-Man for me and for you, from what you've been saying, is those personal connections, those personal moments. It's when Peter, I suppose, or Miles, knows these characters outside of the supervillain that they become. So your Doc Ock or your Norman Osborn's becoming the Green Goblin. It's that journey, isn't it? For the Lizard just to be a throwaway bad guy, it very much seems like a waste.
Yeah, I completely agree with both of you. I'd much like to see Lizard as a bigger threat to Peter in the next game, and like kind of the story to revolve around him.
But going off what you were saying, Spence, like I don't want Harry to be Venom.
Do you not?
Not at all. No.
Obviously, like, we're used to it being Eddie Brock, but they'd have to like introduce us to Eddie Brock at the start, and it'd be kind of the same as a Finn situation. I feel like for this story, it makes a lot more sense for it to be Harry.
Why don't they do what I'm saying? Why don't they set up Eddie Brock in this game, set him up in number 2, and he gets the symbiote right at the end when it's come off you? Like, you could be standing over Kurt Connors about to kill him, the symbiote comes off, goes on to Eddie Brock, it ends. And you're like, holy shit. And you know then you're going into number 3, and it's going to kick off.
I'll tell you what, I've just remembered something that might actually support your theory. After you beat the game, you have a phone call in Miles Morales with Peter, and Peter talks about how he needs to find a new job. And that new job, which I imagine is going to happen in the next game, could be where he meets Eddie Brock.
Well, we already know he's working with Mary Jane in the Bugle, because he went off on that report to go and do that 3-week thing or whatever with Silver Sable supporting Mary Jane as a photographer.
Yeah.
So we could have him being back in the Bugle with another photographer who's supporting G. Jonah Jameson to try and unmask Spider-Man or outdo Spider-Man. So throughout the game, you're just totally making him look like a right mug. Just like in the 90s cartoon. It works so well for his rationale.
I would love it if they are bringing in Eddie Brock, that when you're doing missions as Peter, that you see him taking photos of you doing these missions, and he maybe puts you in a bad light. So you could do a mission in a good way, and you can do a mission in a bad way, and maybe Eddie would take pictures of you as you're doing it, so you could avoid his pictures. So maybe it would change the storyline depending on how well you've done the game. Say you do a mission really terribly, right? Eddie Brock would make you look like the bad guy. But if you do the mission ultimately perfect, then he kind of only just makes you look like a bad guy. That's kind of a questionable point of the storyline.
He photoshops it, yeah.
Yeah.
Basically what we're saying is, just copy the 90s cartoon. It'd be absolutely bang on. The linear progress I want. Spider-Man 2, it's a case of Peter and Kurt Connors. Peter gets symbiote in that story. Get to the end. He confronts Kurt Connors. He's got the power to beat him now. Nearly kills him. Realizes this suit isn't me. Comes off him. Goes on to Eddie Brock, we've introduced earlier. Spider-Man 3, we got Eddie Brock versus Peter. That's the entire game. The entire game, you got this threat looming over you the entire time. Different kind of feel to the game. You got this threat that can just get you whenever. And it's toying with you throughout the game.
So Venom is like Tyrant. He'll burst in at unknown moments. And you've kind of got to fight him off and then get away from him throughout the city and escape him.
Kinda, yeah. Like, I imagine it would be more structured.
Well,
it wouldn't be just like a random thing, he just turns up.
It's open world. It must be very difficult to structure those sort of random events that would happen, yeah?
it wouldn't be random. It would all be controlled, but it would all make sense within the main story that he's just, everywhere you go, you're going out taking Mary Jane out for a meal, and then the next table there's Eddie Brock there. He's like, "Oh, hey, Pete," and kind of introducing himself, and you're like, "Oh my god."
He would say something weird like, "We're having a good time," and then you'd look to the seat and he'd be on his own.
Yeah. He'd be like, "Can I join you? Can I join you?" He'd be like, "Yeah." And so the next thing you know, you got like a table of 3, and you're just like, "Oh my god, this is gonna kick off." And he's just there, and it's just that whole menacing thing. And in the 3rd game, you beat him, right? 4th game, he's in jail. Carnage comes about. You got to give the suit back to Eddie to take on Carnage. Boom! I've written your next 3 games, Insomniac. Retweet my tweet on Twitter. Give it some like, and I'll give you these ideas. You can have them for free. What do you feel about that progression, boys? I think it's perfect, if I'm honest.
I love it.
In fact, I'd almost say it's a masterpiece.
I love it, but I love the whole Venom and Carnage kind of storyline, and I really want someone to do it right. Do it justice. Every time I've ever seen it executed, like it in movies, and I just never really enjoyed it. I want a good Venom and Carnage, and personally, I believe Insomniac are the people to be able to do that because they've done justice to every character that have been in their games so far.
Mate, I have a few issues with your progression. One, it's a bit too mainline. It's a bit mainstream. Kind of what you'd expect to happen. I don't think Insomniac want to do what you'd expect. And also, you're kind of ignoring Harry and Norman being the ending. You're kind of just completely cutting them out.
Bin them off. Change the direction. Bin them off. I don't care. I don't need goblins. Not yet.
I feel like you watched that cutscene, which was supposed to be focused on Norman and Harry. You were like, that's the lizard. That's the lizard.
I was.
Well, isn't it funny that, like, for the last half an hour or whatever we've been speaking, we've talked about the lizard, Venom and Carnage, but we haven't talked about the goblins.
No.
They're just not that interesting. The biggest thing they do is they kill Gwen, and Gwen's not in this. So, and Aunt May's already dead. You can't lose Mary Jane. You just can't. So,
Wow.
Who's going to lose? Miles? He could lose Miles.
Yeah. In the one comic, Green Goblin does sleep with Gwen. If they could explore that route.
She's dead, mate. She's dead in this universe, surely. Surely she's dead by now. Maybe she's not.
Maybe she's not, mate.
Oh, who cares? Who cares? Gwen can get in a bin. She's dead. Oh, they're just boring.
Well, the goblins could be the filler enemies in those games.
They're not.
No,
they're
you
not.
can't do that to the goblin.
You
Can't
can't
call
be the
them
big one.
boring. You can't call them boring.
I
Then.
can call them boring for me, but I just want it to be the 90s show that I can play. That's all I want. But you're right. So far, Insomniac, whatever they choose to do is going to be incredible. I've got no reason to doubt them. If you are somehow listening to this, anyone from Insomniac, please release the Resistance trilogy. So that's been this special episode of In PS We Trust. I've been Davey.
I've been Phil.
And I've been Spencer.
Take care, guys.
Peace.
In PS We Trust is hosted by Davey, Phil, and Spencer. You can write into the show via our email, pswetrust@gmail.com. Our Twitter is @InPSWeTrust. To find each of us online, follow our Twitters, @SSJDavey, @PhilipHoy, @SpenPie_. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other. See ya.